What's going on in the school business?
School's going well. Our numbers are way down. And so we have more kids in school than we've had. You know, things have kind of leveled off, and it's been a great week. How about Gardner Webb? Is it still?
Well, our issue is reliability. We continue to have a lot of different people involved, so that our reporting method is not really reliable. We have one person. If you have this set of conditions, you report to this person. If you have another set, so we have 4 different people. We've made it as obtuse as possible, so that so if you have it, you have to tell one person. If one of your students has it, or if you come in contact. And so in the end, when we first started reporting, we reported all these together. We had one person, and the numbers looked overwhelming, and we had to go online. And so we learned. So we've got 4 different ways to report according to the conditions now. So, and we don't aggregate them, so it doesn't look so bad. We've learned how to manipulate the reporting piece. Exactly what we try to teach you not to do in this course. We've learned how to manipulate the reporting piece so that things look a whole lot better than they really are. So if we put it all together, if we look at the number of staff who have it, the number, they have to report to a different person than faculty does. And if we looked at faculty and staff, and if we looked at students on campus and graduate commuter, so all those 4 different groups report to different people. But if we put all that together, and we didn't separate out quarantine from exposure versus people who have it, that's another layer. So if we put all that together, it looks pretty bad. As one of the ladies got up in the faculty meeting, basically to contradict the president Friday, why are you not trying to protect us? As you know, do you not see the numbers in our county, which are 3rd highest in the state? You're ignoring this data that says it's terrible here in this county. And he got up and read off some things that basically he had prepared that didn't speak to what she said. Basically, she said, "What time is it?" And he said, "This is a nice watch, because we're going to stay open." And he said, and to his credit, he said, when we had the convocation, not the convocation, whatever, not convocation, that's when students come. When we had our, whatever it is where we kick off the year, the big faculty meeting, when he said, "We're not closing, we're not going online, we're going to stay open, doesn't matter." And so we have taken great pains to figure out ways to report in a way that it doesn't show the total picture. And that's where we are. So if we have numerous cases, we have people who have it, faculty, staff, we have a lot of kids with it, but we're not going to put that together in aggregate so that we can say this is where we are. The county, Cleveland County, is only 39% vaccinated, has the 3rd highest total in the state right now. It's really bad, as bad as it's been in Cleveland County. Now, the number of cases, the hospitals are full. The county next door, I'm back in the very, very northern part of Mecklenburg at Lake Norman today, but during the week when I stay in Lake Lure, which is the very northern part of Rutherford County, Rutherford County is only 33% vaccinated. And that's, where Gardner Webb is just out our back door is Rutherford County over to the Cliffside area. And that area you'd be hard pressed to find anybody vaccinated there. I mean, anybody. We had a lady that worked for us last year. She just worked 1 year, that lives over there, and she got it and gave it to our office staff this summer. That's why we had no support group this summer in the School of Ed, or now the College of Ed, since August. But we don't tell things like that. I mean, we're in a really bad area for vaccinations. And so we, again, look at Deol's 10 ways to cheat with data. If you can't change them, confuse them. Just change the metrics, split it all out into different pieces and parts, so that you can't get an aggregate look at what it looks like. But it's really bad at Gardner Webb right now. Now it will get better. That's the thing about it, is it'll get better, but we'll see how it goes this year. Good morning, everybody. But it's a case study in how you underreport your data, which, let me stop my video for just a second. My signal's a little unstable. All right, I think we'll be good now. Which is, one of the things we talk about to start in a rant this morning is bias. And we're not talking about bias, gender or diversity or any of that. We're talking about bias of the numbers. When, and we're supposed to always err on the side of caution in our numbers. That's why we subtract 1 from the denominator and do all those things, so that we don't over-report the effects of our program treatment or fix. We don't want to say we're getting more results than we're actually getting. Well, in this case, we're using that notion of bias in the opposite way. We want to make sure, again, that we underreport what's going on, because that's opposite of what public health would want us to do, but it's exactly what we want to do if we were determined to stay open this time around, that we're not giving anybody their money back. Now, that's been clear. If you get COVID, that's on you, but we're not giving you your money back for your food service or your dormitory. If you have to get sick and have to go home, you're not getting a refund on anything that you paid us. We're not giving refunds this year of any kind. Whether it, if you get COVID, that's on you. That we take no real precautions to stop you from getting it, again, on you. We're not requiring a vaccination. We're not requiring masks. If you get COVID, that's just the rub of the green. That's the luck of the draw. But we're not giving rebates or those. And so we have two competing interests here. We have public health interest, and we have financial interests of the university. They are at odds. Which master do you serve? This is a leadership question for all of us. In the part, from Gardner Webb's perspective, again, number one function of leadership of an institute or organization is to keep the organization alive. They need the money. But what happens when it's not just about ethics, it's about public health? What do you do in those cases? Folks at Gardner Webb would argue that we're reporting, but you're not putting in an aggregate where people can get a realistic view of what's really going on. Well, that's up to them. We're following, what we're legally mandated to do. Are you following best practices? Well, we're following what we're legally mandated to do. And that brings us back to our case studies and the things that we do in this course. Is there's legal and there's ethical. What I preach every week, or rant, that old crazy man rants and raves about, is you can't just be a legal leader. You have to be an ethical leader too. You have to take care of your people. You have to look at people as a resource as a positive resource in your organization rather than simply an expense. It goes back to your view of how do you view your employees and your client system? You know, we ask you to be ethical leaders, not only legal leaders, but moral and ethical leaders as well. And so that the pandemic has put a lot of people, you know, in that position, choosing between being moral and ethical and being legal. You know, choosing to maintain a profit or a profitability or a viability financially and not. And so we see a lot of people advocating over a return to normal, not because it's the right thing to do public health wise, but because if they don't, they'll go out of business. And so this pandemic, more than anything in my lifetime, has made people define what is your real value set? What do you value? And do you practice those values in a leadership role? It's easy to have values and morals and be an ethical person when times are good, but what happens when times are bad? What happens when what happens to your integrity when you're in Daniel and the lion's den? You know, that's one of our Sunday devotionals is live your life with, you know, the three guiding principles of leadership are: be a servant leader, operate with integrity, and build your life on a foundation of your faith. It's real simple. And the second of those is integrity. And you know, the verses in my Sunday devotional on that one are about Daniel and the lion's den. When it comes down to it, what will you do? And so COVID has defined for us who are ethical and moral leaders and who aren't. You know, I can't be, you know, I hate to be critical, but it's really simple. And I wish that we'd be a little more honest with our numbers. Maybe not honest, but be a little clearer with our numbers. Report a little more ethically to make people. I mean, one of the reasons why we report is so people can understand. Just like we're going to talk about figures today. The whole notion of using figures, charts, tables, and graphs to report is to make the picture clearer. That's the whole notion behind those, but we've gone the other direction. How can we report without really reporting? How can we give an incomplete picture so that people don't put it all together? That's kind of the notion here. Well, welcome everybody. Glad you're back. Sorry for the confusion about the time. We had, again, part of what Melody got me started on this rant this morning is we partnered with the school district in Gaston County, and we were going to have an event today, but they canceled. We went online and we did it Thursday because of their numbers. They're a little more ethical in their behavior. And so they felt like it was an unnecessary risk. Now they're back in school and they're doing things, but they felt like getting together today with a group of adults scattered from all over was just too high risk. It's not an acceptable risk to do. And so we may try again in a couple of weeks or 4 weeks or something, or next month, or it may be 2 weeks, but I'll let you know as soon as I know. But they just didn't feel like it was the right thing to do today. And so they made the call. Like they pulled the plug, Wednesday or Thursday? They pulled the plug Wednesday, I think it was, which was the right call to make. A couple of the people involved in this meeting are suffering from COVID. So they said, no, we just can't do this. And so, so I have an event scheduled with them with Gaston County Schools at some point. I'm doing a project with them that I will have to go to if we meet, but it's not right now. So, but they made the call. Now, I don't know if somebody hadn't been sick, if they'd have made the call or not, but they made the call, so which was the right call to make. So let's look quickly at our weekly schedule. Let me share my screen. All right, we're at Saturday, October the 2nd. We're going to cover through chapter 12 of Salkind today, and we're going to do our case study. Please remember to keep up with your discussion boards. Remember that in Deol, the Salkind tests are optional, but some of you are taking those, and I appreciate that. I read all of those. I have to grade your essays on those, and so I do like it when folks do that. And so that's where we are. We're to meet again in 2 weeks. We'll complete Salkind and start Merriam. And so that brings me to the first question of today was, one of the Merriams is about, Melody asked me this morning about Merriam, where you do some work with your classmates. That's if we get to meet. That's when our middle weekend was face-to-face. If we get to meet, and right now I'm not planning to meet. I can't see meeting right now anytime soon. So if you get to that one and we haven't met or aren't going to meet, then you just skip that part. You will do some interviewing online. You will for a case study later on. So we'll make up for that piece that we missed on the interviewing face-to-face. You'll do it in your Zoom case study group. So we won't miss it, that activity. It's just will be done in a different way. I've incorporated that into one of our case studies in case we don't get to meet face-to-face. We've not for so many semesters now. But I don't want us to miss that part. It's a vital part of qualitative work is how to interview. So we will do that in our case study. All right, so let's jump right in this morning, the central tendency. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm not going to go through these PowerPoints, slide by slide. I'm just going to pop up the, let me see. I'll have to look at that, I guess, right away. So we're looking at measures of central tendency today. Mean, median, and mode. And we know what those are, and we know how to compute them, and we always, use the unbiased estimate. We subtract one from the denominator in order to, so that our numbers, we don't over-report our numbers. One of the things we have to be really careful about, big N is the entire population, little n is the sample. Trying to remember that when we are using measures of central tendency, we're trying to describe a population or a sample or both. We're trying to tell folks what it looks like. And the reason why we might want to talk about both is when we pull a sample out of a population, the whole notion is we run our program, treatment, or fix on that sample, and we take those results and we want to compare them back to that larger population, because the whole notion is we're using that sample to represent or generalize the findings from that sample to that larger population, simply for convenience. You got 1,000 people, we can't collect data from all 1,000. We'll pull 100 of them, and if the data distributes normally, then we could take and generalize that back to that larger population, those findings from that sample. But it has to distribute normally. The mean, median, and mode have to be the same. Let me say that again. To have a normal distribution, the mean, median, and mode have to be the same. Not only for the sample, but for the larger population as well, for them to mirror one another. We always are worried about getting an outlier sample. And so one of the things that we do is we run a chi-square to make sure. You say, well, we don't have a comparison group. Well, a chi-square goodness of fit test, what it does is it allows us to compare our sample to a theoretical distribution that we would expect to find that our group is an outlier or not. That in fact, we didn't pull a random sample. We have a biased sample or an outlier sample. And when that happens, we can't compare the results of that sample population We can't generalize that finding to the larger group. Why does that matter? Well, the whole notion of a sample is it's representative of the larger group. And if it's not truly a sample. Now, one of the things that we do is we manipulate samples intentionally, that unethical piece, so that we can get the results that we want. We predetermine results by determining what our sample are. It confirms what we want to hear. I heard again this week that the reason why retention at the university is poor for the undergraduates, especially from last year's freshman class, was food service and dormitories. Let me say that again. What was reported again this week is that our retention issue, we lost 40% of the freshmen who entered last fall. Of the 471 freshmen, 203 did not return back this year. Let me say those numbers again. Of the 471 traditional undergraduate freshmen that came to Gardner Webb last year, 203 did not come back. That's 40%. And the explanation again was food service and dormitories. Is that a viable explanation? Yes or no? Why?
Is there enough information? Like where did that come from? Did people tell them that?
There we go.
Also, does all 500 students live on campus or lived on campus last year, or does that number also include commuter students? So because if it includes commuter students, you can't use a on-campus problem for a transitional student problem.
That's exactly right. That 471 was all of them. There was probably, I want to say 80 of those were commuters. Do you think food service and dormitories mattered at all to commuter students? No. That was completely anecdotal. You know, the person who reported that said, I've had 4 or 5 students come up to me and say it was about food service or food service and dormitories. 4 or 5? Is that a representative sample of the larger population? No, as Jamaica pointed out, 80 of those kids could give a hoot less what the dormitories and food are like. They commute every day. The others, you know, and see, now here's the thing. Think about this. Those 4 or 5 that came up and complained about food service and dormitories, did they leave? No, they didn't even leave. So are they a representative sample of that 40%, that 203 that left? No.
But you'd have to survey also how many times the ones on campus use food service, right?
Yeah, we could sit here and spend the rest of the morning talking about ways that this was just completely erroneous. What we would have to do if we really wanted to find out why they didn't come back, we would first we'd have to access them, wouldn't we? Not the people who stayed, who are complaining about my dorm room needs painting, or I don't like the food choices in DCC in the CAF. They stayed. Is that the same group that left? No. So, but that sounds good. That's a quick and dirty. That's an easy way for, you know, that you could try to explain away this problem. Now, we have the real data. Have we disclosed that publicly? Oh no. Oh no. We do exit surveys with the ones that leave. What might you suspicion that they said the reason they left was? Why'd they come? Received value. Why did you go? Lack of received value. Why'd they come? Did they come for the food service and the dormitories? Why do students come to college? Something to do, get out of the house, don't have a job. I mean, why do traditional undergraduates at 18 years of age, why do they go to college?
Education.
Education.
They want
Instruction, right?
that freedom and that engagement with other people.
There you go. All of that education. The heart of that's instruction, isn't it? You know, one of the big mistakes and one of the big fallacies that public school people make, K-12 people, whether it's public, private, or charter, cultural, yeah, that's true. One of the mistakes that we make is the notion that if kids behave better, they'll learn more. No, they learn more if you teach them more. Just sitting, putting your head down on your desk and behaving yourself in class won't make you learn anything. If you got to engage kids, it's got to be a cultural experience. But there's got to be, instruction has to engage students. Now, if they come to a place and the instruction does not engage them at a level that they think they ought to be engaged, that's generally the most the most significant reason why students leave is lack of engagement. That they think, well, I could go to a state college and be sitting in a lecture hall of 400 and get the same experience that I'm paying twice as much for here to be in smaller groups and be engaged. Now, because you have smaller groups, does that mean that you're engaged? No. Does teaching methodology, that it doesn't change because you have a smaller group, but you have the opportunity to change if you have a smaller group. Just like today, we have the opportunity to change how we teach. That doesn't mean we will. I had the opportunity 2 or 3 summers ago, and I'm being so that you can't track this down. I had the opportunity to be in Frank Nanny Hall, which is right across the street, the road from Craig Hall, where my office is. And in the summertime, we teach over in Frank Nanny a good bit because they tend to have air conditioning over there, and we don't generally in our building in the summertime. And so we go over there and have our weekend classes, or we have classes during the week. And I had the opportunity to be over there in Frank Nanny. My committee that I'm on this cycle, Ed Policy and Standards, meets over there, or did then. We've moved that as well, but we were meeting over there. And so my point is, I know that building real well. I'm teaching classes in there, or I'm having committee meetings or whatever. So it's not unusual to see me over there. It's not, I'm not there every day, but I'm there enough that I get a pretty representative sample of what's going on over there. And I get a representative sample of what's going on in our building, because I'm in there every day in the classroom building at Craig. And so, but I happened to be over in Frank Nanny Hall, and I watched one of the professors of history teach his class. And he had his podium out, and he was standing there reading his lecture notes, and I was just stunned. He had 2 students in class too, and he was lecturing to. Now, there could have been 200. It wouldn't have mattered. He's not changing his instructional modality, if you want to call that instruction, whether he's got 2 or 200. So if you're one of those 2 students, why would you pay twice as much to go to a college that was small class sizes when the instructor is simply going to lecture to you like you're in a hall of 200? Now, that's the feedback that students give us on the exit surveys is the instruction here is awful. I might as well just go to state college and get the same thing for half the price. But we don't want, that's a much harder conversation to have. That's harder to change than to claim, well, let's just food service and dormitories. It's not food service and dormitories. When we do the net promoter score, those turn out, above average every year. It's not food service and dormitories. It's poor instruction that makes students come or go to college, because that's what they came for in the end. But that's a much more difficult conversation, and that's a bigger problem that we don't really want to. And so what we're having to do is, because students are opting out, we're having to go to this notion that we're not giving you your money back. That we're selling customer service and then not providing it, and then we're mad that people don't want to continue to pay for it. Not understanding that we're in a customer service business. So therein lies our problem. And when we collect data, we're collecting it from a group that's not representative of the group that we really want the data from. If you want to know why people leave, you have to ask the people who left. Let's go back to Hertzberg. Let's go back to our theoretical underpinning here this morning. Share my screen. What does Hertzberg say in the theory of motivation, satisfaction, and dissatisfaction? He says that they're independent of each other. The reason why people stay are not the same reasons why they go. So why in the world would we ask people who stayed why the other folks left? Would it be the same reason? No. That's flawed from the very beginning. Our entire theoretical framework is flawed from the very beginning. The only way we're going to find why people left is to ask them why they left, not ask people who stayed why those people left or didn't come. And that notion here, or the same things that are important to the people who stayed are not the things that were important to the people who went. The people who stayed, food service and dormitories are irrelevant to them because they have to eat and live there every day. But the people who left, that wasn't important to them at all. So our theoretical framework is flawed from the very beginning. So none of the data that we collect after that is going to be either reliable or valid, because our theoretical framework, we pull the wrong sample to try to estimate the population with. All of life is population and sample. Just like all teaching is curriculum, is process and content. On teaching, our curriculum is all process and content. What to teach and how to teach. All of life is population and sample. Now, these folks that are doing this are supposed to be smart enough to know this stuff. So what would be the excuse for these kinds of things? Well, it's intentional. It's real simple. Is you can't give folks a pass when they know better and don't do better. We want you to be ethical leaders. I want you to be ethical leaders who know better and do better. But you have to have critical conversations and face hard truths when you're honest in your data. David just made a good point. All rural kind of colleges are losing right now because we have a great population shift back to urban centers. We know that's going on in society right now. Why would we think that colleges would be different? Why are people going back to urban areas or more suburban areas than rural areas? Anybody, somebody, anybody. Why is that population shift? There's a great population shift. There's a great migration going on in our society. Why is that? Anybody?
More resources in urban centers.
So, the village idiot that I am, I sold my house in Rutherford County and I bought a condo. You get older, you don't want to keep stuff up. The yard, had huge yard, 6 acres of grass. It cost them a fortune to get it cut, and had a big house, didn't need it anymore. And just needed something more manageable. So I sold my house. there that I'd had for years in 2018, and I bought a condo more from the area. Now, the house was where my wife and I had initially lived when we got married nearly 40 years ago, and I bought a house, had her mother in it. When she passed, I fixed the house and sold it. Big house, big yard, sold it. Bought a condo at Apple Valley in Lake Lure, the area where I'm from. That's where I stayed during the week. And so I asked one of my neighbors if they had pickup laundry service. I mean, I live in Lake Norman. I set my clothes out on the front porch on Mondays and Thursdays, and they bring me clean ones. Just send me a bill every month. There's a million other things here, but I mean, that's how it works here. And so I asked the people in Lake Lure, I said, do you have pickup laundry service? They said, well, you idiot, we don't even have laundry service here. What are you talking about pickup service? So it's an hour one way or the other to even get to a laundry, and you have to take them. And I was like, you don't have pickup, we don't have a laundry. I just order my groceries online, and they'll either bring them to me or I just drive through and they set them in the back of my vehicle. I asked them, do they have pickup grocery service? They said, we don't even have a grocery store here. What are you talking about? You got to go 12 miles over here to the grocery store. And no, they don't have pickup service. They don't have online order. And, you know, and I'm, wait, what? You know, what about, there are no doctors here. There is no hospital here. There's no health care. There's no pharmacy. There's no laundry. Wait a minute, you know, is there not somebody that come by and pick up your garbage? No, we don't have garbage pickup here. Well, what are you talking about? And all of a sudden, when you get to be retirement age like me, you know, you get to be a certain age, certain little things like that you never even notice, you know, back when you're young, all of a sudden you begin to realize, wait a minute, these modern conveniences of life, and if you don't have those, and if you've ever had them, and even if you don't have them, like public services, medical, you know, all those kinds of things, next thing you know, life gets really hard, especially for working adults and all those things. And so, you know, what about jobs themselves? You know, so we have a migration for services and for social activities and those kinds of things. What if your college is in a very, very rural area? The biggest problem at Gardner-Webb right now is buzzards. I can't make this up. I'm not smart enough. So that's the crisis at Gardner-Webb right now is buzzards. We're out in a rural area and we've got two large flocks of buzzards that have descended on the college. You might have seen the email this week that said if you're on campus and you hear an explosion, duck and cover, but it's because we're setting off explosive devices to try to run the buzzards off. I can't make this up. That's where we are. And so when I left on Thursday, one of the flocks was circling the music building right next door. I counted over 30 of them. They were just right above the circling over. So I don't know if they were going to. And so I drove out Gardner-Webb and I headed toward Lattimore going north to 74 so I could go back to Rutherford County. And right across from Springmore Elementary School, right there in Boiling Springs, the other flock had landed in a man's front yard. And oh my Lord. Now, I don't want to get into buzzards, but buzzards do not smell good. And they have a gag reflex as a defense mechanism. You do not want to get around buzzards. Now, these are not the little, this is the big ones that are knee high. And they were 30 to 50 of them in a man's front yard right there across from the elementary school. They are a tremendous problem. I'm not to be facetious, they are a tremendous problem. But I don't suspect you have that problem in Charlotte. You know, again, just the craziness of we're in such a rural area. Now, when students come to school there, you know, the kid right behind me next door, I told you they're recruiting him for baseball when he was that age 4 or 5 years ago. He just finished at Virginia Tech. And he went there and he wouldn't even go on the tour. He said, but Lord have mercy. He thought you know, most rural place he'd ever been in his life. See, that's part of it as well. In terms of the experience of being there. It's not about food service. It's not about the dormitory, even for those who were there. And they tell us that. It's the social engagement piece, It's the instruction is the same as if it were a state college. Lack of quality instruction, lack of a social life, anything to do. I mean, Gardner Webb is a suitcase college. On Friday afternoon, you can lay down in the road, not get run over. Everybody's gone home. That's the way it is now. If that's the reality, what you've got to do is you've got to be good at the thing that you're supposed to be good at, which is instruction and engagement, and fixing a problem that doesn't exist. A solution hunting a problem. Food service and dormitories is it's disingenuous at best. It's insulting at worst. But again, population and sample. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of the way I interpret that is if we read the garbage in, garbage out. So when it comes to solutions, the solutions don't match up with the issue. I watched the Georgia State Auburn game last week, and it sounds like Gardner Webb is trying to protect a lead or something, and Georgia State the second half began to protect that lead and they lost.
Yeah.
Eventually it catches up with Gardner Webb. So if you got the real data, then you decide, okay, if it's engagement, what do we need to do for kids on campus? We need to build some stuff. We need to add some stuff, because eventually this trying to protect the lead is going to catch up with Gardner Webb, and it's going to, next thing you know, the time runs out and you're going to throw an interception. That's an analogy.
Yeah. Well, Ernest Hemingway, they asked him how he went bankrupt, and he said, gradually, then suddenly. That's what happens. That's analogous to protecting the lead. You didn't notice it. You were trying to hang on, and all of a sudden, boom. I mean, that's the way that's the way financial insolvency happens. Is you struggle. Now, a few years back, to David's point, they tried to do something for students, but it got so politicized that it didn't work. In terms of, they said, we'll build a student center. The old one that was in the bottom of DCC, where the cafeteria was on the top floor and the old student center was underneath, they still have the same furniture and carpet as when my wife was in school there. And you see how old I am. And so they said, we're going to build a new student center. And they did. They built a new student center. But what was the fallacy of the new student center? Besides, it was a financial boondoggle that we're still, that may crash the university anyway. That's another longer story on the financial end. Where did they build a new student center for students? Did they build it in the common area right there where students are all day between their classes, where they could go, or around the dormitories or any of that? No. They built it out next to the football stadium so it could be used so when the alumni came and we could do conferences, and when the alumni came to ball games, we could meet over there. So we built it all the way at the very far end of the campus, away from where all the students are. You don't go by there. And with 15 minutes between classes, what are the chances are that you could use it during the day? None. Even if you had a class and you had an hour break in classes, it's too far to go over there. You got to go find your car and drive over there, or you got to walk over there about 15 minutes both ways. And by the time you get there, what have you got to turn around and do? You got to turn around and walk back to get to your next class. So do any students ever use the student center? That would be no. And because they don't use it during the week, what are the chances of them sticking around on the weekend to use it? It's not a part of the hub of campus, so it's empty on the weekends as well. And so we've basically colonized it now with 1,000 offices of the staff of the university has taken over the student center. And so when you walk in there now, it's just full of offices now. We've got a little food service, a couple of little food services places and a little coffee shop, but they never get used. It's too far. It's not in the political move was to build it over there so that we could use it. We don't really have a field house, to do the dignitary thing on on ball game day, and so we'll go over there, you know. So the campus stores over there, the bookstore, those kinds of things. And so we said we're building these amenities for students, but we really didn't. We didn't make it where they could use it. So although we did attempt a student center, we do have a student center, it's just not for students because it's just not handy enough for them to use it in any real way. But again, you know, we can a solution hunt and a problem. We can manipulate food service and dormitories. We can those are things that we can claim that we have fixed, but eventually the numbers just aren't changing. We're trying everything in the world to change the numbers. Now, quite privately, I was contacted to give them some names, some people that I know in CMS. They're going to try to start recruiting in Charlotte, but Charlotte kids think the world ends right past Gastonia. I don't think that'll work for them either, but they're trying all these different things to get more students to come. And then they're employing solutions to get them to stay once they're there that don't work. And so our enrollment has been flat or a little less. We're 1,000 undergraduates down over the last 12 years. You know, the great economic depression of 2007, 8, 9, we've never come out of that, and we still are waiting for those students to come back. But we're employing solutions. We tried building a student center, we built it in the wrong place. We're doing all these things that we'll do anything but what the students tell us, which is we need better instruction, we need more engagement, but we don't want to do that. So we'll do anything but what we actually need to do. And that's what a lot of businesses do. And to David's point, they try to protect the lead that they have, or it's gradually, then suddenly. And so what happened during the pandemic was we can no longer afford to recognize there is a pandemic. We're not giving money back, we're staying open. And so as long as we stay open, the General Assembly will send us money, but we're not giving it back. But back to the original notion of measures of central tendency, they report on populations. But we have to be ethical in our notion that this population actually is representative, the sample is representative of the population, and that we're pulling an actual random sample when we're doing that, and we're pulling the right sample according to our theoretical frameworks. We don't ask one group when we should be asking another group. We don't do all those things, convenience things. That's why we call them convenience samples. They're not only convenient in terms of access, they're convenient in terms of they tell us what we want to hear rather than what we need to hear. So let me answer a couple of these questions that are in the chat, and we'll move on. How does campus feel about fraternities and sorority social clubs? They don't like them. That's another issue. They don't support those at all. They don't allow those. Do faculty instructors see engagement as an issue? Just because you work at a college doesn't mean you can teach. And that is also part of the problem, and even in the School of Ed. I see bad instruction every day in Craig Hall. Now, half of it's the English people. You know, remember we share our building with the English faculty. You know, it would be a stretch to call what they do teaching, the English bunch. I've never seen a group as bad as them collectively. Oh my Lord. They couldn't work for me. I can tell you that. They ain't got a clue, the English bunch. They're as bad a group as I've ever watched. And I watch them all. I just, you know me. And now if you've seen me in person, I am a large person. And I mean large by any standards. I am a large and tall person. I fill up a doorway, side to side and top to bottom. So I don't slip around. it's impossible. You can hear me coming. You can see me. A shadow comes before I get there. And so I don't slip around. I'm just who I am. And so I just walk up and down the hall, and I just stop outside the door and watch. You know, if you want to fight about it, we'll go out in the road, but I just watch. They are singularly the worst bunch I've ever seen, and collectively the worst bunch I've ever seen. Now, the undergraduate School of Ed people, the practitioners that we bring in are pretty good. The ones that we've got on campus, on faculty, oh, they're awful. They're bad too. And so when I walk around the buildings and I go over and again, other buildings, go over and watch the history bunch over in Nanny, ooh, they're brutally bad. I mean, and a lot of these, their content would lead to engagement. They don't know how to teach. They don't even know how to use Blackboard. They're not good. No, they're terrible teachers. Well, I'll tell you, and this is not about me. I'll tell you right now. I was recently recognized. Let me get this right now. 33 or 30, 10, 13. Okay, I'm teaching in my 34th semester at Gardner Webb. Semester, not year, 34. Remember, I did 32 years elsewhere. I'm teaching them, so I've taught and completed 33 semesters. I've been in the top 10 instructors for 33 straight semesters. How bad is everybody else? And I have not been out of the top 10 in 33 semesters. I mean, that tells you all you need to know. How in the world could I be in the top 10 for 33 straight semesters? What that means is nobody else is even trying. It's not, you know, see, the problem here is I'd like to, you know, stand up and roar and tell everybody how good I am. But the problem is I'm only really competing with 2 or 3 people that even care, that it even matters to. Now, I employ 31 adjuncts in my program. We have the largest graduate program on campus. If you can't make on a 4-point scale, if you can't make a 3.5, I can't keep you. I refuse to keep you if you don't make at least a 3.5 with your students every semester. You know, the last time they reported, and it got so embarrassing, the last time they reported the top 15, I had 13 of the 15, including myself. And so they quit. This is Deol's award for his bunch every semester. And it got to be kind of, you know, just made everybody else mad. So they quit reporting that. They said it was detrimental. I asked, well, why aren't you reporting? I don't care about me, but all these folks that I have here, they want to be recognized. They, you know, I require them to actually be able to teach by, you know, making everybody else feel bad. Not my job to make them feel good. That's not part of the function here. Not my job. But no, the question is do they think they're good? Well, they think they're good, but are they good? Well, no, they're not good at all. And I tell them that every chance I get. So you can imagine I am well loved on campus, in that I point out that y'all can't even do this a little bit. But now you've got to be able to have critical conversations with people about their ability. Now, when I hire people, they have to work with me 2 semesters before I turn them loose on their own to practice or malpractice on our students. You've got to coach with me 2 semesters. You got to be with me a year before I'm going to turn you loose. I got to make sure you can do this. These people are paying real money. I'm not just, you know, we're not just, you know, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. It's not a process or a system. Just, you know, I leave nothing to chance. If you can't teach, can't work for me, because that's what we hired you to do. It's amazing. Would you hire a man to cut your lawn that can't run a lawnmower? Well, of course you would. But we do it Gardner Webb all the time. And so to the point where our instruction is so poor, we have removed instruction from our strategic plan for the university. Let me say that again. We are a teaching college who has moved instruction out of the strategic plan and replaced it with research and grantsmanship. How many undergraduates come to your college because you do research or because somebody got a grant? That would be none. And we can't figure out why students won't stay. Well, it's real simple. You know, but I will move on from that. But that, no, we can't teach. We don't require them to go through QM and learn how to build shells. We don't even require them to use Blackboard. Only 30% of the undergraduate people at Gardner-Webb even know how to open Blackboard, and they only use it for a grade book. And so it's, and the president knows because I told him. He said, you depressed me. He said, I want to go back and fire somebody. I said, well, you ought to. We were having this discussion at lunch one day, right before the pandemic. I said, well, you ought to go back and fire somebody. Hire a crowd to teach, you can't teach. It ought to get you upset and excited. All right, so moving on to chapter 3, variability. It talks about the spread of the dispersion of scores or responses. You have variance, standard deviation, and range. Range is the top score and the bottom score. Standard deviation is the average distance from the mean that scores vary. And variance is just the standard deviation squared. And so where that comes in and comes to play tells you how tight your scores are and how much confidence you can have that you have a fairly normal distribution. It also comes in handy when you're doing z-test and z-scores. And that's where I want to stop for a minute and do a clarification here. There's a difference in a z-test and a z-score. So let me go to that. I've got that prepared today as well. Let me share my screen. All right. Come on. You can do it. I'm having problems here. There it is. All right. Z-test. Z-score. Looks very similar, but it's completely different. We can't confuse the two. But let me attempt to explain the difference in the two and why our measures of variability are important. Z-score. The classic example, and I wrote this in all the discussion boards, the classic example is when you're trying to make a decision about admitting somebody to undergraduate school, or we'll use that one since that's most relevant, and then we'll use the other one as well. So let me stop my share. All right, so what are the two primary scores when we look at a kid's scores? We're not talking about GPA or class rank. What are the two standardized scores that we look at for college admission? SAT and ACT, right? And they purport that they measure the same thing, which is readiness for college, to do college work, right? Same thing in graduate school, GRE and MAT. Exactly the same function here. One of them is a longer test that's scaled on 1,600 points, just like the SAT is. We're not talking about the writing sample. We're talking about the quantitative and the analytic part, and the writing part, the reading and the math. So ACT is like MAT. It's on a 100-point scale. So the scale is 1 to 100 on ACT and MAT. And it's, 400 to 1600 on the SAT and the GRE. How do you compare those scores? You do a Z-score conversion, where you convert them both to a standardized score that can then be compared. And so what you learn is an MAT score of 43 is the same as making 1260 on the GRE. It's just that simple. But we use that standard deviation. We have to know the mean and the standard deviation. If we know those things, we can convert any score so that to a standardized score, and then we can compare it to another one that we standardized, regardless of the scale. That's what a Z-score is. And that's what we do when we're doing admissions in graduate school. We do a quick Z-score conversion, because every administration of GRE, MAT, ACT, and SAT reports both the mean and the standard deviation when they report the scores. You do a quick conversion, and you've got a kid that's applied to undergraduate school, and he's got an ACT score of 23, and you're comparing that to a kid who made 990 on the SAT, which is a better score. Those are roughly equivalent scores, by the way. But that's what that allows you to do. You can't just do a conversion, a simple mathematical conversion. You have to put that degree of variability of how much standard deviation and what the mean is in there, and we use that to calculate so that we can come with a standardized score and we compare. Now they've got to purport to measure the same thing, but they're on vastly different scales. Now, share my screen. What is a Z-test? Z-test is a little bit different. A Z-test is you're just checking to make sure you've got a normal distribution. We generally use chi-square to do this, but this is when we check a sample to make sure that it's a random sample. And we can also use the chi-square goodness of fit. The difference is we use chi-square goodness of fit on survey data that's opinion. Let me clarify that piece now. All right, we're trying to check to make sure that our sample is truly a sample of the larger population and it's not an outlier. If we got test scores where there was a correct answer to the test, we just use the Z test to make sure that it's randomly distributes and it's an actual random sample. Well, what about when we give a survey and it's people's opinion and that's not actually a right or a wrong answer? What do we do then? Well, we just use chi-square. It does the same thing, but it does it on survey opinion questions to make sure your population normally distributes. So, or your sample distributes, and then we can compare that back to the bigger population. And so, Z-score allows us to standardize a score from any scale that we know the standard deviation and the mean, so that we can compare it to another score from a disparate scale, a different scale that measures the same thing, so that we can compare the two to see which one's higher or lower. A Z-test, we run that on data where there was a right answer, 2 + 2 = 4. All right, we give them a math test, and there is a right answer. We make sure that that group, that sample is there. Yes, the standard deviation on all these tests will always be provided along with the mean. That is a standard reporting function. And so if we have a survey, if we send a survey out to a sample of a larger population, how do we know that that's not an outlier? We run a chi-square. It gives us a theoretical distribution. Again, this is, I agree or disagree, or I think this, or I think that. There's no right answer on those kinds of surveys. Where there is no right answer, we check with a chi-square. real simple. So we're always checking our work. We're always trying to be ethical, moral, legal. We're always trying to be professional in what we do. That's the notion here, that we want to be as truthful, as honest, as accurate as we can be. We don't intentionally pick a outlier group or use a convenient sample to make our point. That's the solution hunting the problem. We've already decided what the answer is. We just got to go find some data that matches that. Now, when we can't control the sources of data, we just try to confuse people. You know, instead of saying we've got one person that everything about COVID is reported to, and here are the number of people who've got it, here's the number of people who are in quarantine, we break it down into commuter students and faculty and staff and on-campus students and all graduate versus undergrad, all these different things, so that we don't report it in aggregate. We're trying to make it, instead of trying to make it clearer, we're trying to make it less clear, so that we can argue our point, which is we're you know, the numbers aren't bad, so we're soldiering on. Well, how bad would the numbers have to be? Well, there is no how bad they have to be. We're soldiering on, regardless of the data, and that was pointed out. I mean, how can it be this? How can things be this good at Gardner Webb when the entire county's got it at this rate, third highest in the state? That doesn't match. You're telling us that, you know, you're claiming that we're not a representative sample of this larger population. This is their data that they're reporting, but we're reporting this. How can that be? There's a disconnect here. Either your measurement isn't accurate or your reporting is inaccurate, one or the other. Neither. This is, you know, we're asking you to believe this because we need for you to believe this, because we need to stay open. And, you know, you must have an excuse to not come and do what we ask you to do, go to your meetings, teach your classes. And so this is one of those cases where we're trying to claim that we're not a representative sample of the larger population in the area, when in fact, of course, we are. But we're trying to argue that we aren't. We're using our power for evil rather than good. That leads me to this point, and I'm watching our time. We've got 10 minutes. We're right on where we need to be. Figures. The whole point of figures is to clarify things, not make them more confusing. Figures are charts, tables, and graphs, by the way. And so when we look at that, here are some, you know, I really like this. I really like, if I could find it here. Let me get rid of that and get back here. We've already covered that. There we go. I like this title, 10 Ways to a Great Figure. Remember, figures are charts, tables, and graphs. Minimize the junk, plan before you start creating, say what you mean what you say, label everything, communicate one idea per slide or per figure, keep things balanced, maintain the scale in the graph, simple is best, less is more, limit the number of words. The chart alone, chart, table, or graph, should convey exactly what you want to say. But now when you want to not communicate, or you want to communicate a story different than what the data actually tells you, you do exactly the opposite of all of those things. You make them as How many charts have you seen that have 1,000 different lines and colors and all that kind of stuff on them? Graphs mostly, and all of those things, or they have all these different colors, or they'll have a chart that has all these different bars and going up, and you're like, what the world does any of that mean? Well, the whole notion there is when you see that, somebody's trying to deceive you. Somebody is trying to argue a point that is not arguable, or is trying to hide something that is. They're trying to make it. And so that's why I said, instead of having one central notion about COVID and saying, this is it, you know, everybody that's got it, this is how many, we've got 4 different people to report to, and different groups. But and so in the end, we're all just confused about, well, how many people have it or don't have it, or what's going on. This is what the county is reporting. They're just reporting the number of cases. Why can't we just report? Oh, no, we can't do that. We ought to have one person that says, these are the numbers, period. This is how many people got it. This is how many people in quarantine. That'd be pretty simple, wouldn't it? Except it would tell too complete a story. Again, we tend to want to use our power for the point we're trying to make. Again, a solution hunt the problem. This is what we believe. We're going to cherry pick the data that fits this. And if we can't do that, we're going to make it as confusing as we possibly can, so that we can't really get our finger. We can't zero in. Now, some people do this intentionally, some do it unintentionally. Unfortunately, some people just don't know any better. But when you're dealing with people at a university who are all supposed to have a doctorate and gone through methodology, you really can't claim ignorance. It may be that, but you know, you really ought not be able to. But so you know, motivations are different things. We've already talked about the Z-score and Z-test. So the last thing in this section this morning is correlation. And we've talked about correlations. But now let's remember there are 2 different types of correlations in terms of the calculations. And this matters to those of you who are in public education. Everybody else, not so much. So I saved this one for last, and it's not very lengthy. There are 2 types of calculations for correlations. There's Pearson, which is the standard one, and then there's Spearman. And both of our teachers are 5th grade teachers, is that correct? And so Pearson correlations would be appropriate for you. But what if you were a K-1-2 teacher? What kind of assessments do you give? Do they give? They do M-class or dibble data. And that data is not an actual score, it's in categories. And so when you're doing data, when you're looking for correlations in categorical data, that's not an actual score. Can't use Pearson, you have to use Spearman if you're doing an actual calculation. Just remember that. But we know what correlations are. They're from -1, from -1 to +1. They tell us a relationship between 2 variables. And it can be positive or negative. You know, positive is the more of one, the more of the other. The more you smoke, the more cancer you get. The more you exercise, the less weight you get. That's a negative correlation, which is a good one. And so it doesn't matter about the positive or the negative, it's the actual number. So a correlation of -9 is a stronger correlation than +6, because 9 is higher than 6. But we have to be careful with correlations that we don't understand that there are other factors other variables other than those 2. Back to heat, ice cream, and crime. The variable that heat and crime are correlated with, or ice cream and crime is heat. They are not correlated with one another. And the problem when we do simple correlations rather than analysis of variance is we only look at those 2, and there might be more than 2. So when there are more than 2 variables, we do an analysis of variance rather than a correlation. When there might be more than 2 variables, we do an analysis of variance rather than a correlation. Now, same thing, same concept with t-test. T-test, now follow this carefully now. Listen carefully to what I say. A t-test determines if you got two different groups. Well, wait a minute, Del, we just have one sample group. We did a pre-test and a post-test. In the middle, we did the treatment. What do you mean two groups? Technically, understand the technical language here. After you've been through the treatment, if there's a change, you're no longer the same group you were to start with. And so you will hear that language a lot of times and people get confused. Well, they're comparing two different groups. Nope. It's pre-test, post-test, same group. But if they moved, if they changed, they're no longer the same group. They no longer have the same characteristics as they did before. And a t-test just does a pre-test and a post-test. What's the problem? David mentioned this in one of his answers this week. Problem with the t-test is it only looks at, it doesn't factor in, might be other things that cause that change. It simply looks at whatever the treatment is, and we attribute whatever the change is simply to that treatment. There might be alternative explanations. We give a group this test, we give them a treatment, we test them at the end, something else might have happened as well. That was even more significant than our test, our treatment. And so correlations only look at the relationship between two variables. Pre-test, t-test only look at the pre-test and the post-test. It doesn't allow for alternative explanations, just like a correlation doesn't allow for alternative explanations. So in heat, ice cream, and crime, the alternative explanation is for the increase in ice cream and the increase in crime is heat. There is no correlation between crime and ice cream. When we're looking at pre-test and post-test with kids, what happens in their social life or their home life many times has a lot more impact than the treatment that we did. They get out of the homeless shelter, they become more stable in their home life. That's why they did better in school. It wasn't that little after school program you had for them, or having somebody from the bank come in and read to them. That didn't mean a damn thing. Their life circumstance changed. So we have to be careful when we're doing t-tests and when we're doing correlations, because they are the very simplest of the analyses that we do, and they do not allow for alternative explanations. And so one of the things that's kind of that kind of clues you in to somebody's being a little disingenuous, they'll do multiple t-tests. No, just do a multiple analysis of variance. But they're trying to sell you on an idea, or this is the solution, whether it is or not. Again, that's the solution, not the problem. They're trying to sell you on that. And so basically by creating the reporting system that Gardner-Webb has done, they're trying to sell you on multiple t-tests rather than looking at the aggregate for a more conceptually advanced argument. They're trying to do little individual t-tests to show you that things are a lot better than you actually know that they are. Now, David has thrown in, and we're moving into our break here. When we come out of break, we'll do our case study. Association. Association is much weaker than correlation. It is usually associated with qualitative data. Correlation is quantitative data. T-test is quantitative data. Association is generally our language, our reporting measure. When we're looking at our themes in qualitative data, when we talk to 15 people and they all tell us the same kind of things, then we understand that there is some association there. Remember, in qualitative, there is no right answer. It's just people's opinion. And so we use association. We don't use correlation in qualitative work. When we've asked people their opinion, we only use correlation and t-test on data that there is a right answer. Yes, no, true, false, fill in the blank, regardless of that there is a right answer, not just somebody's opinion. When we're looking at themes on opinion data, which is qualitative, we talk about association. We can't talk about correlation because we can't run a test for correlation on people's thoughts and ideas. And now you're beginning to see why some people argue in the theoretical sense, in more academic sense, that you can't mix qualitative and quantitative. Well, you can in action research because we're very clear to keep them separate in practical application. Because we can't use the same terms, we don't use the same measures. And remembering, there in quantitative data, there is a right answer. 2 + 2 does equal 4. Qualitative, it's only people's opinion. And as we know, 40% of the country right now have completely different opinions on what the right answer is than the other 60%. And it's not rooted in reality. But they're entitled to their opinion. But that doesn't mean that it's little t or big T truth. You know, that there are right answers to some of these questions. That they don't believe them is immaterial. It doesn't change the fact that they're the right answer. We have to be very careful about that we can't report people's opinion as being the right answer, or that we can't say, well, you're allowed to believe that. No, you can believe it, but that doesn't change the efficacy, whether it's true or false, right or wrong. And that gets into political, but you know, for our purposes, quantitative, there is a right answer, and we can talk about correlations, and we can talk about t-tests for significance. But those are very simple, very low level, don't allow for alternative explanation. More advanced looks are analysis of variance, where we look at all the variables and we attribute a percentage of variance to them in terms of how much they cause the final score, the dependent variable, to vary, the score to go up or down. On the other side, we have qualitative work that is just people's opinion. And we can't talk about correlation or significance, t-test for significance. What we have to talk about on that side is association, themes. I hear the same things over and over. You can't mix the two. You can make some really compelling arguments if you do, but they're disingenuous at best. They're unethical at worst. All right, so we're coming back at 10:35, and we'll start with our group. Who goes first this time? Who went last time? Blair's group, y'all go first this time. I'll see you in 15. Melody's back. Quite a stir in Johnston County this week over critical race theory. Did you read the policy? Quite a stir. All right, so we're back. We're getting ready for our case study. And so my question to think about it for this one is there such a thing as situational ethics? Just keep that in the back of your mind. Is situational ethics a thing? All right, Blair's group, you have the floor.
We'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, Dr. Lamb and cohort. This is the case 16A of team diagnosis and intervention. And we're going to start out with, excuse me, let me name my group, Tamiko, and also Blair, and I'm yours truly, myself. And so We'll start out by giving some background information about the organization. Again, we don't know specifically what this organization is. We can make some assumptions, but based upon the data that was received back, we know that there are 12 team members based upon the quantitative replies that were given. They were across the board from one to 5. 12 team members. We can make the assumption that John is the apparent leader of the team. We noticed that a Likert scale was used to address team diagnosis. One thing we did discuss, and Dr. Lamb, you told us in class, is that the middle of that Likert scale, neither agree or disagree, can be a problem. And in some cases, we subtracted that out because we didn't know where individuals stood. We know that the survey provides both quantitative and qualitative feedback. We'll address that, Jamiko and Blair will. And we noticed that there appears to be some dysfunction brewing based upon the qualitative data that we've received back. Again, we know from class those are merely opinions, but we did discern some themes, throughout that process. And there are issues in terms of group dynamics, and we can't make the assumption that because someone is in leadership that they understand group dynamics. So we'll address those issues, and at this time I'll turn it over to Jamiko for the next part of our presentation.
Yes. So in looking at all of the data, one of the questions for the case study talked about how might we display the data so that it might be easily digestible for the audience. And something that we decided to do was like looking at the high scores and the low scores related to strengths and also related to areas of improvement. So when we look at the strengths, we looked at the scores that were above 3, so ones that were either strongly agree or agree. And these were the ones that had like the highest scores. Of all of the higher scores, every person that responded to the survey to this assessment talked about their team, knowing that I know that my team contributes to the organizational goals. That was the highest one that I got a response, closely followed with, I have a clear understanding of my role on this team and the goal for our team is clear. Which is very interesting when we look at the low scores. So folks that responded with strongly disagree or disagree with the statement. While folks understand the team, it seems as though that on the other end of that, team members encourage each other to do their best. Most of the responses were in that area, and were mostly strongly disagree. But there was a significant number of other responses in the middle that were kind of like, I don't agree or disagree. So the highest number was 6 respondents in that area, and followed up by team members had conflicts. Team members handle conflicts openly. That apparently that's not something that they do well, and also people feeling proud to be on the team. So it seems like looking at the 2 different scores, the 2 different charts, like it might be telling different pictures, because in one end, people are saying like they have a clear picture of what they're doing, but then they're not actually proud to be in the space.
And so, and based off what Jamiko just presented, now we're looking at from the team feedback session, from the qualitative part. And we know that it is classic qualitative because they're open-ended questions, and open-ended questions obviously indicate qualitative measures. And so some of the themes that we saw from the qualitative perspective was high performing team. And again, we put that in bold because that was what we viewed as a positive. And so that stood out. But the other things that stood out more, I guess, on the negative side was lack of trust, a lack of leadership, lack of support by other subordinates. We saw that this is a kind of a cliquish mentality or lack of cohesiveness by the team, and that the team does not appear to support each other based upon some of the comments from the qualitative feedback. In addition, we saw the exacerbated situation was John. You had to be in John's inner circle. And from this qualitative, we felt from the qualitative feedback, we felt like John was, it doesn't really give any clear indication that John's title makes him the leader. We really don't know that. We're basing this off the assumption that he is the anointed leader as opposed to leader by designation. So we don't have enough data to say, reveal that, but based upon the qualitative data, John is the leader, and we don't feel that, and we know that leadership matters, and we feel that that's causing some issues with the team. Turn over to Jamiko at this time for the quantitative part.
Yeah, so very similar to what the qual talked about. The team knows their role, goals, mission. They know their job. They believe that decision-making practices are effective, and the mission is clear of the organization. However, some areas that were concerning, there was a lack of team support or encouragement. Those scores were very, very telling in that area. Also, they talk about having an inability to handle conflicts openly, and also the employees do not feel proud of being a member of the team.
And as a result of that data, we analyzed and thought about it, and it relates to what Dr. Lamb was talking about earlier in terms of the central thing, thought about ethics and leadership. So at this level, we felt like the team lacks collegial ethics and teamwork that affects the ability of the team to function effectively. And in addition, we felt that the lack of strong leadership from John impacts the team attitudes. So we felt this was the central problem that was occurring with the team, and that are leading to some of the problems that we're facing. It's time to turn it over back to Jamiko.
So thinking about those central problems, people not being able to work together and there not being a clear leadership examples from the leader that we assume to be John. Based off those results, we believe that the priorities that need to be worked on would be in team members being encouraged to do their best, team members learning how to handle conflict openly, and team members feeling like they want to be a part of this team. So being proud as a member of the team. And as we continue with our next slide, we'll talk about how do we address these concerns and these priorities.
So through analyzing the qualitative and quantitative data, we agreed that there was a morale issue going on with this organization. So the recommended solutions that we have come up with for intervention is a team development. For the team development intervention is to hire an organizational development consultant. This consultant will help to develop a team retreat, which will serve as a kickoff for a series of team development trainings. Hopefully this retreat and the trainings will help to strengthen and stabilize their team dynamics, help to understand their current team culture, and help to develop a more respectful culture, and to provide leadership development. So attached is our agenda for the retreat. This retreat will be for 1 day, and the continual of the training sessions will last over the next 8 to 10 months. There will be an evaluative tool that will help to assess if there are indeed positive changes of attitude that are happening. The agenda for the retreat, they will start off with a welcome and an overview, and they will also be establishing meeting norms. This will help to make sure that everyone feels respected and heard during their meetings. based upon the qualitative data, there seems to be some cliquish behavior where there is an influence of John that affects the decision-making and others' attitudes and opinions of other members. So establishing these meeting norms will help to stabilize the meeting so that everyone is heard and their issues can be addressed. Also, we will be implementing a meeting agenda template where all team members must provide their updates on what they are working on. A feedback from the survey said that one of the team members said that they would like to know what other team members are working on, but there's never really enough time to discuss. So that will be a part of the team meetings. Also, the agendas for each meeting will be sent out prior to the meetings so that team members have time to go over and read through the agendas and see what other team members are working on, so that if there are questions or concerns, they have that time during the meeting to address them. So back to the retreat, they will start with their meeting norms, making sure that everyone agrees on those norms. They will go through and discuss the survey data, their strengths, their areas of improvement, and their priorities. They will then go ahead and explain this intervention plan, how it will work, and how the training sessions will be over the next 8 to 10 months. And then they will go through their mission and vision and establish an evaluative tool collectively. They will go through and make sure that the evaluation tool, which will be a survey that the team members will take bi-weekly to gauge, again, if there are changes in the work environment. And they'll make sure that the tools that are on that survey actually relate back to their mission and vision and are in keeping with building of the communication and trust that seems to be broken right now. We chose 3 different activities for them to work on. They fall heavily with the issues that are going on with the team as far as trust, communication, and conflict resolution. The first activity is called Frostbite, where there will be one leader. It can be John, or they can choose another leader. For this activity, that leader has frostbite, so they cannot physically touch any of the materials, and their team members have to assist them with actually completing the activity, but they are blind, so the leader has to give them directions while the team members are trying to complete some sort of task. This will help to share light if there are communication issues. The next activity is called eye contact. This one will help with transparency and opening up the lines of trust and communication. They will start with working with a team member who they talk with weekly, and they will just share some of the things they're working on currently, and they have to make consistent eye contact. A lot of times it shows when we were looking up team building activities and conflicts among teams, a lot of them do not make eye contact when they do not feel a sense of trust with the people that they are working with. And we honed in on that with the qualitative feedback that one person said that they don't trust anyone. They feel like no one has their back. So we felt that it was important to have a trust activity in a part of the retreat. After they work with the person that they are familiar with and they have kind of broken the ice, they will then transition and work with a team member whom they do not normally come in contact with. And they will again share something that they are working on and ensure to make eye contact. The last activity for the day is called the Orange Negotiation. This activity will work with conflict resolution. There will be 2 teams. Each team is trying to convince the local farmer to allow them to purchase their last rare variety of a specific orange. Both teams need the orange for specific reasons. Team A needs the juice of the orange to help cure a deadly disease. Team B needs the rind of the orange to help with research for this same disease, but they cannot tell the other teams why they need it. So this activity will help to open up, again, lines of communication and see if they can truly work together within their teams to then try to work with the second team to help with their conflict resolution. Again, these activities are lighthearted activities, but they are used to open up their eyes if there are people within the team who do not see the issues currently, those people who are within the cliques, to so that they can open up those blind spots and try to get a more respectful working environment. Again, this retreat is a one-day event, but it is to kick off the upcoming trainings and sessions that the consultant will be leading. And again, the evaluative survey will be conducted bi-weekly by the team members. The questions on the survey will be based on the prioritized areas of improvement, and the feedback from that survey will be used to see if there is any additional support needed or if any changes to the trainings need to happen. So thank you for listening.
Okay. Questions? All right, very good. Let me share my screen again. All right. So David started out with the issue that there is a problem with our instrument in terms of the responses on the quantitative part, the 5-point Likert scale. Again, going back to Hirschberg, this is basically a satisfaction survey is what this is. And so remembering that satisfaction is not on a continuum. It's two different things and different factors. It's two factors and different things make up those things. And so we can't leave a middle column there. You're either satisfied or you're dissatisfied. You agree or you don't agree. We can't leave that middle column. And so the reliability of the instrument is called into question immediately. When you're doing satisfaction work, you can't have that middle column. And that's what this is. It's a satisfaction survey. So that's our first problem. Our methodology is flawed from the very beginning, in that we are using a validated instrument, but we're not using it reliably. We're not understanding what we're trying to capture here with this instrument. So we've got a reliability and validity problem right off the bat. All right, so that's our first issue here but what we can do to fix that, if you're the consultant and you're presenting, here's the quick and easy fix. Let me stop. Let me get rid of that and go back to let me move this out of the way so we can see this. So when we look at this, if we move all of these over here to the left, the default on neither agree or disagree with the middle is if we move all those to disagree, what we find is now all of a sudden the problem that we have with our data that our quantitative and our qualitative don't match, and they don't. The quantitative data says things are pretty good. The qualitative data says, oh, this place is a hot mess. There's two different groups here. It's a bimodal population. That's not what the survey says. But if we move all those threes to disagree, all of a sudden, wait a minute, we've got two groups of 6 here. So that's your first clue that you've got. You say, well, how do I know that my instrument's not reliable or valid? That's why in action research, just like in this class and just like in your consultancy, we have you do mixed methodology, either convergent, where you compare the two, or explanatory. That's the reason why. We always do that in action research. That's the methodology you use in real life. Because you got to make sure. You can't just say, this is how you reliably use this survey, and this survey is valid. So therefore, ergo, the results are going to be reliable and valid. No, you have to check yourself. That's the first thing. You have to test yourself for validity and reliability. And in the convergent design, we collect quantitative data, we collect qualitative, and we compare the two. If they don't match, we know we've got a problem. We know that we've got an issue either with validity or reliability or both, as in this case. But that simple move over to the threes are now disagree, all of a sudden our data matches, and now we can go forward. Now, what is our data telling us? Telling us that we've got two groups. We've got an ethical issue here. And so in terms of this group, John is the leader. He's the official leader of this group. Is John an ethical leader in this case? No. He has his group. That's an ethical issue where you have your group and you're always in competition with the other group. You intentionally shut them out. You don't keep them informed. Now, in terms of organizational goals and achieving organizational goals, if you're spending time fighting one another in this group of 12, do you have time to really devote the time and energy and expertise to the organizational goals? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the question I'm asking you. If you have a group of 12 people and they're divided into two groups of 6 and fighting one another, can they achieve the organizational goals that you've set out for them in their best lives, in their best sense? Can they do that? That would be no. Does this happen? Happens a lot. Now, so my argument to you today is ethics are binary. They're yes or no. You either have them or you don't. This notion of situational ethics does not work in a practical sense. If I can't trust you to be an ethical leader in this sense and running two competing groups, can I trust you with other things that I can't see, that aren't this easily measured? Can I trust you with those? If you would do this, what is off limits for you? You know, the first case study I have for my law students is where a teacher intentionally harms a student, Worst thing you can do other than physically harming a kid, you know, she fails the kid for the year over a minor assignment that would count less than 1 point in a yearly grade. She makes it count more than half the yearly grade and fails the kid intentionally. Can you keep that teacher? If she would do that, what's off limits? Oh my Lord. Would you be surprised if she harmed a child physically? Would anything, if she would do that to a child, would anything be off limits for that person? Absolutely not. Person can't work for me. That's cut and dry. That's an easy one to see. In this case, can John continue to work for you if you're the leader of this organization? That's the first recommendation you're going to have to make is John has to go. You might move him somewhere else in the organization, but he can't be the leader of this group and he shouldn't be a leader in any sense. Oh, we'll fix John. This is not a fixable problem. Let me say that again. Ethics is not a fixable problem. If you can't do math, I can help you with that. You know, if you don't know this technical piece, I can train you on TaskStream or Blackboard or Canvas or Zoom. I can train you on those. I can't fix your ethical shortcomings though. That's fool's errand. That's something as a consultant and as a leader or both, you have to understand. You can't fix a person's ethics. They're not going to have the conversion. I tell people all the time, I'm still Saul on the road to Damascus. I'm not Paul yet. I haven't had that conversion. I need it. I'm looking for it. I want it. But I'm telling you, nobody has an epiphany. Nobody just has that moment when the light hits them and they go to their knees. Either you have ethics or you don't have ethics. What is it? And pardon my language. What is it they use in the EDCI doctoral program at Gardner-Webb? they call it GAM, grown ass man. You ain't fixing grown ass men or women. That's one of the things, you know, those people are really smart. The curriculum people, they're really smart. And one of the things that they acknowledge right away is this a program problem, or is this a people problem? And if you've got grown people that are making these kinds of decisions, it's a fool's errand to try to think that any program that we can put them through is going to fix this. It's not going to happen. They're going to be the same person that they were at the end of your program. Now, I like everything that you had in terms of your action plan, and I like your activities and team building. Absolutely, you have to do that. But John can't be the leader of the group. What you do is you get a new leader, then put them through this. Now you could say, but we didn't do that with John. Well, you know, you can't help that this wasn't done with John. John wasn't trained how to lead a group and do it ethically. John's default is not being an ethical person. We can't continue with John. We can't, you know, one of the things that we have to understand is as leaders and as consultants, and I'm using that kind of interchangeably, is that there's certain things that we can't fix. You know, and it's a fool's errand to think that if we can design a program good enough that we can fix certain endemic problems. Having a leader that is not an ethical leader is not a fixable problem. It's just not. You have to understand that. And so once you get this data and it matches and it shows you that John is running a shadow group inside of the larger group, that he has his clique and that he's running that clique to the detriment of the others. He's basically using it to punish, he's rewarding his group and punishing the other group. You cannot have that in an organization. That's an ethical lapse that is not fixable. That's an unpardonable sin in the business. You've got to move on from John. You can't, that's just one of those things that, and that's hard. That's hard to do. But nothing short of that, your action plan and that you've got going forward has a chance to work if you don't have John. With John, it has no chance. Because what is the reward system right now? You're trying to teach this group a new system of a social construct of what you're supposed to be doing. We agree how you get advancement, rewards, punishments. We agree on that. John had his own system. And as long as John's in place, everybody is going to continue to understand, well, the company can say whatever they want to, but John's my supervisor. And if I don't keep him happy, if I don't stay in his group, then that's the reality here. And the only way to change the reality is you have to change John. Then we go back, then we can, that social constructivism model of what we all agree is important and how we ought to operate, then that can kick back in. But you're not, John is having his needs met by the way that he has organized this group. And as long as John is in a position of authority, you're not going to change that. You've got to understand that sometimes it is a people problem. In action research, it's either people, the product, or the process. Let me say that again. It's the piece of people, the process, or the product. That is always what's at issue. This is a people problem. It is an ethical problem, as y'all identified. You're exactly right. It is an ethical lapse. It is a people problem. It is John. John is your problem here. And his problem is he's not an ethical person. It's not about the process. It's not about the product. It's not that, none of that's in that. We start with people, then process, then product. So when we work through that little quick and dirty people, yeah, it's a people problem. It's an ethical issue. He's an unethical person. Can't fix ethics. You know, that's not going to change. And so we have to move on from John, and then we can enact the plan. So that's the only, that's my critique, is that you caught the issue there, that the data doesn't match. It's because of the misuse of the Likert scale. You do have a plan. It is a team building. You are going to have to do all those activities. Absolutely perfect. The thing that you got to do, you got to make that hard call, is we're sans John. We move John out. We have a new leader. We go forward. And you're exactly right. And then all the things you have become relevant, and they're exactly what you should do. Team building is what you've got to do here. So excellent job on that. But again, got to be a little harder. You know, there's some unpardonable sins in the business. John is gone. John's got to go. Just like the teacher in the scenario that failed the kid for the year over a minor infraction. One minor, we all agree in that case that y'all haven't seen it, but that Bobby is, Bobby's a turd. That's what we call him in the business. Bobby's a turd, but you can't allow teachers to do something like that to a child. It just can't be done. I mean, in all businesses there are unpardonable sins. Mistreating a child that badly is a non-starter in the school business. Having an unethical leader in business will lead you to renege, will put you out of business in a business sense. Those are kind of the hard and fast rules.
Dr. Lamb.
Yes.
I would add that, or I would ask really, that a lot of times John would not be gone.
Yeah. And everything you do after that won't work. And you sitting and scratching your head and other parts of your body trying to figure out, I know I did the right thing. We did all this team building, until you let John go, none of it's all just window dressing.
Right.
What I call usual customary practice, UCP. We're doing the right things, but we're not getting the results. Well, then that means they're not the right things. They're just the usual customary things that we always did. What's the definition of insanity? Back to arduous double loop theory. Do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. I mean, we can put the organization through this wonderful action plan that you have, but it won't work if John's still there, because John's still there. But Melody is right. We don't let John go, and we go through all this trouble. And basically, what that means is that we're punishing the rest of the organization. We're putting them through all this stuff that we know is not going to work. They know it's not going to work. They know that when we get through training today, we go back and we still got John, and his rules still apply. Regardless of what the organization says, John's still in charge. And so his way or the highway, his rules still apply. If we want real change, we have to let John go. That's the only way. But you're exactly right. Too many times we don't let John go. And that's why we don't succeed as organizations. That's why we don't have any real change. That's why things don't get any better. We go through all this stuff, but things don't ever improve. And you wonder why they don't ever improve. We did the right things. No, you did the usual customary thing. The right things are the things that work. But how many times have you seen in organizations we continue to do the same things over and over again when the answer is staring us right in the face? They're in that office right over there. We could fix it if we wanted to. We don't have the political will to fix it. Now, the good thing about being a consultant is you hand them your recommendation. You try to beat the check to the bank and cash it before it bounces, and it's up to them whether they follow through or not. But now, as a leader, you don't have that in an organization. You don't have that same option. You know that until you change John, nothing's going to change. Your outcomes aren't going to change. And so then, what are you going to do now? Well, you have to do what leaders have to do. Yes, David.
Dr. Lamb, just thinking, so to your thought, I mean, what you're telling us, I was thinking then, I guess my question, and I'll add to it. Can organizations create monsters? And I guess what I'm after is it a people first problem or an organizational problem? If the organization is creating a monster, that being John, then how do you know the difference? Because we get rid of John and it was an overall organizational problem. So we hire a new John to come in, but it's an organizational issue. We're going to create another John. So how do you, I guess my question, the organizations create monsters, and how do you get rid of the monster?
Well,
Yeah.
What a great question. Perfect question. Yes, organizations can create those monsters. And how do you get rid of them? The action plan that you just put in place. That's how you do it. You say as an organization, this is what we're going to do. And you follow those steps that y'all so eloquently outlined in your presentation. That's how you that's how you do that. But are there organizations that allow little kingdoms to pop up? Absolutely. And they're very dysfunctional. Yeah, I mean, John can only operate if you allow him to. If you send him a check every month and and make sure his key lock, still works on the door every morning. You are, you can say we believe this and want to do that, but as long as you keep employing John, then that's called goal displacement. And when y'all studied SMART goals in one of your classes, that's one of the things, one of the functions y'all should have learned about was goal displacement. This is what we say we want to do, but by continuing to employ John, this is really what we're allowing to happen. This is our real goal. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. Through goal displacement, we do allow Johns to pop up in the organization. The way you fix them is let John go, and then you build the team that you want. This is what's important in our organization. And you put that action plan that y'all so eloquently wrote. That's what you put in place. That's how you do that. But you're exactly right. Without that action plan, if we just let John go, he got too big for his britches. We hire another person. We get Sally. Now she becomes the new John, because this is the way our organization works. And so you got to do both. You got to let John go and put the plan in. That's why I said y'all have got the plan. You're exactly right on how you the goals and the values of the organization. But you got to let John go first. You can't do it with John. You've created this monster. And you got to, you got to get whatever metaphor, insert metaphor here. You got to get rid of it.
Dr. Lamb, can I ask you another question?
Monster. Pardon?
Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
Okay, if you were you're John's boss and you've looked at this survey, would you make this decision based off of these 11 questions, or would you go back and interview these people and try to find out why and try to get more information? Or you would just off of this? I mean, I guess my hang up in my group when we were discussing this was we didn't really know much about, you want to give us some added information. We didn't know who gave it. We didn't know how many of them gave it. We didn't know if one person put multiple negative comments. Like, it was hard to say this collectively represented the feedback.
Well, that goes back to the original question and then the original piece when I started this. How you've got to be sure in your methodology. You've got to know that you're measuring what you intended to measure, and that your data truly represent and is accurate. It is an accurate. This is a sample. Is it an accurate representation of the bigger issue? And so, in this case, what I would do and what we do, and this is a snapshot of from what we've got. We make this decision. In real life, we would have more data than this. Certainly, we would talk with these people now. One of the things that we have to be careful about talking with people about is will they all open up and tell us, or do they think that's going to be used against them? You know, what is your organizational dynamic? Are people allowed to express their opinion freely, or are they only, or you know, the anonymity here? And we would obviously be tracking this data to make sure that that one person didn't fill out 6 surveys. But you know, but one of the things that when I have to make decisions on adjuncts, whether I'm going to keep them, is I look at that data, but I also look at other factors as well. And I look, is this one person's mad, or you know, is this across? And I generally give them the 3 semesters of an academic year: spring, summer, fall, or fall, spring, summer, the way we normally do it. Do I see a collection of the same comments over those same 3 semesters, good or bad? But I tell them, you get 1 year, you get 3 semesters. And at the end of those 3 semesters, if I'm seeing the same comments in semesters 2 and 3 that I saw in semester 1, then I don't see any, you know, I will work with you. I will help improve you, but I have to see some change. But if I see the same things over and over again over that defined period of time, and so this would, you know, a one-off, but in a case like this, if I am sure from my data collection that there are 2 that we've created basically he's created the hit squad here. He's got his own little SWAT team, and they're competing with the others, that he's done that. Then it's, you know, if I know this data to be reliable and valid, I don't need 10 years worth, or I don't need 1,000 interviews. If I am sure that he has done this, then I'm going to move John on. You know, now there's a lot of issues about EEOC and employment and those kinds of things. In the school business, we do action plans, but now I tell my EDCI doctorals this: you can't lead a school until you can let a person go simply because they can't teach. They may be a good person. They may be the cheerleader coach. They may be this, they may be that. They may be a wonderful person. But we can't keep you if you can't teach, because that's our core competency. When we have a leader, their core competency is ethical behavior. That's their core competency, regardless of the business. When we put somebody in a leadership position, you know, their core competency is ethical behavior. You can't lead if you're not an ethical person. You got to have ethical leadership. And so this is just like when we hire a teacher, they've got to be able to teach. When we put somebody in a position of leadership, they've got to be able to lead. They've got to be able to lead ethically. That's a big piece of ethics. Ethics are, you know, the most important part of leadership. So this is not like, you know, he didn't, you know, take the mail to the mailroom today. This is the very core of what we hired that person for. Again, the most important piece, or the actual most crucial piece of leadership, is ethical behavior. Will you carry out the goals, the missions, values, the goals of the organization? Will you act in the interest of the organization? That's what ethical behavior is. And so if you're not doing that, you're not carrying out what we hired you to do. And David pointed out the first tenet of leadership is followership. If you've got 6 people that in your group of 12 that aren't following you, you're not a leader anyway. You're just a tyrant. You're just a manager. You know, that's how organizations fail. Is that the followers don't follow through on what the mission, vision, and goals of the organization are. They're not with us. They're not participating, other than showing up and getting a check. That's the danger in keeping a job. But again, you know, being a servant leader, acting in integrity and living your faith. Those are all, that's all ethical behavior. There are 4 paradigms of ethics. Care, justice, critique, and profession. Care, justice, critique, and profession. Those are the 4 paradigms of ethical behavior. I've got a lesson plan on that if you'd like to see it. I thought y'all probably covered that earlier in your studies, but the ethics of profession. When we hire a leader, that ethic of profession has to kick in. And if you're absent those ethics, we can't have you as a leader. Now, we might have some other place in the organization for you, but it can't be in a leadership role. Because of the ethic of profession. That's what kicks in. You know, we have the other 4, they kick in at different points where you are in the organization. Care, justice, critique, and profession. But the one that matters for a leader is the ethic of profession. Do you carry out the goals, the aims, the mission, the vision, the purpose of the organization? Or are you just looking out for yourself? That's what matters. All right. The group that went first last time. Go.
Do you want me to share or will somebody else share? There you go, team.
All right. We are Alexandria, Candace, Tim, and Kim, and we're going to walk you through case study 16A. So first off, we were going to address the case details. As the last group stated, there's limited information about this case. We actually have almost no information about this case. We are given a summary of the team's average responses from the short diagnostic survey. We can make assumptions about the team composition based on the survey results. We assume John is the leader based on the comments. And we have 12 individual responses to the survey. We assume that no one has taken the survey twice, and we're going to assume that there are 12 members on the team and that this is not a sample, but this is actually the population. We also know that there was mixed methodology used for this case. We have a quantitative survey, and then we have qualitative open-ended questions that follow. The methodology here, like Dr. Lamb just talked about, they used a 5-point Likert scale to go from strongly disagree to strongly agree. But we know from Hertzberg theory that satisfaction is not a continuum, and therefore the methodology in this case, in our opinion, is flawed. Ideally, if we were the consultant, we would go back and say, we're going to use a 4-point scale so that we force a decision. Either the team is satisfied or the team is dissatisfied. But for the purposes of this case, we have moved the folks in the neither agree nor disagree column to be tallied with the disagree column. So we see in the next slide that there is a comparison between the 5-point Likert scale and the 4-point Likert scale. It's pretty much the same data. You have the top statements that scored the highest in the mean, and you have the statements that scored the lowest in the mean. They're pretty much the same. The means were lowered when we went from a 5-point scale to a 4-point scale, but we would expect that. There may be a reason that they chose a 5-point Likert scale. It may be that they wanted to hide some of the feedback and allow people to hide in their neutral choices. But we were going to force this out of them in use of the 4-point Likert scale. So with that case set up, I'm going to turn it over to Tim to go through the data.
Let me ask a quick question. Is the mean as important as the distribution here? Don't
No.
absolutely don't get caught up in the mean average here. Look at the distribution. How many is on the disagree side and how many? Look at the distribution. The mean does not give you an accurate depiction here. Look at the mode where the responses. This is a time when mode is more important than average. Where's the distribution fall? What's most repeated? And when you do that, the all of a sudden, as I said before, to be redundant and to interrupt you folks, all of a sudden your quantitative and qualitative match. They're 6 and 6. Just like you noticed that half of them are John's team and half aren't. All of a sudden, when you look at the mode, the distribution, it's kind of half and half. Half are satisfied, half are dissatisfied. Amazing. That's convergent. That's mixed methodology, convergent design.
All right. Sorry, I get myself together. For the present the data, I would use graphs and images to show it, and then use the explanatory method. Explanatory research method is used to design a problem, is used to investigate a problem that is not clearly defined. And because it's not clearly defined, you have to go back and you have to find out like the root cause of the issue and the secondary problem. So you can really enact the solution. So we know that more information is needed. I think for the case that the convergent methodology was probably used because it's open-ended questions, give you a feel, and we know that the data pretty much matches, like we just said. Half of the group feels one way, the other half feels another way, feels the opposite. So the data shows that there's obviously a problem between the teams, specifically with John being the focal point of it. So this is just an example of the way of the data that I would show to the team, and just to be able to, so they can visually see what's going on and how it looks across the board. Because we all know that data really is the true answer and shows what's really going on. So this would be an example of quantitative data. And then this is like the full spectrum showing the answers, and this would just be another example of quantitative data. And I'm trying to move forward because I know a lot of this information has been covered by the group before us, and I don't want to just keep repeating the same thing. So I'm going to keep moving. So now to get to the qualitative data, it was an open-ended question asked at the end of the survey, and then it kind of gave an example of what some people feel. But once again, this doesn't really give us why these issues are happening. It's telling us like taking an example straight from the text. The team is fine if you're a member of John's inner circle. Otherwise, you'll be ignored. So those are some of the responses, but we want to figure out why John is doing this. Why are the certain members clicking up, so that we can find a solution to the problem, which would go back to the explanatory method. And then moving along, finally, this is just looking at it practical and using something that I'm a little bit more comfortable with. The 2008 Lions did something that's a really hard thing to do. They went 0-16, didn't win a game for the entire year. And if a team is losing, it's easy. If a team is losing, and I was just to give a survey about why the team is losing, similar to this case, the team you would see answers like the offense sucks, so the defense can't stop anybody. but it would take that deep dive into the data to understand what's going on. So if you took a deep dive and asked a lot of questions, and you went back and did went back and did focus groups and interviews, and then pulled data to show what was done during critical moments, you would find things like personnel issues, play calling, decision making, and that would and that's what's resulting in the team feeling the way that they felt, and would kind of just show you what you need to solve. So now I'm going to pass it over to Candace.
Thank you, Tim. So in this section, we had a discussion about the qualitative data from like the open-ended questions, which we felt like should have been more direct at the end of the survey. But while we were talking and discussing the current issues, we picked up on some themes that contributed with conflict within the team, such as team dissonance, professional expectations, and other relational conflicts and communication barriers. And to the right, we also talked about how the team does have a perception of high performance, but because they do work in silos and have lack of trust, communications, and other issues within the team, they do have a potential to be high performing, but they're not reaching their maximum capacity of performance because they're not working collaboratively all the time or consistently to achieve their goals. Also, we talked about John appears to either have a lack of self-awareness or he may not even care. But there's a pattern with John and him consistently or inconsistently displaying himself as a leader. And we have some comments down here. We talked about sometimes when a leader shows a certain level of favoritism to a certain group, and this could be because they may have worked together a little bit longer, or some of the newer people hardly transition later, it does make people be more reserved about putting their all into their work. So people, like for example, I may know how to do certain charts and graphs and provide certain data for assessments, but because I really don't care for David too much and how David treats me, and I see how he interacts with Kim, I'm going to reserve my knowledge and not bring that to the team. Also, with that, with the comments where they was talking about how he was showing like favoritism and cliquish and things like that, we just want to make sure that we have a conversation with John about maybe like understanding equity in the workplace. Like if you do want to show people that you appreciate them or that they're doing a great job, this is how this can be done. And we had added some elements there. So for example, let's say that some people think that they're cliquish because, one group may always go to lunch all the time, or one group may laugh with each other all the time, and, you barely connect or talk to the other group. That will cause a divide and make people feel like there is a high level of favoritism. And just understanding other people's appreciation language. Like, for example, some people like to give kudos in meetings, but I may give kudos to Melody all the time and I never acknowledge Blair. That doesn't mean that I don't think highly of Blair. It's just maybe my interaction with Melody may be more frequent than my interactions with Blair. So just making sure that we have a full understanding on that. And the last thing is, I know that they were talking about people showing initiative or having an understanding of what other people are doing or contributing. Just looking at the format of the meeting, because it appeared that, John could be rushing through the meeting and not allowing the rest of the team to contribute, or because they don't really care to interact with each other, they are not contributing what they may need to contribute at these meetings. So they may be short and not as informative as they need be, and we could be missing information. So just talking about this, meeting the team's overall needs, and including the things maybe like one-on-ones, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, or just sending emails all together for updates. And then just making sure that we're keeping everyone informed and discussing issues and leaving space and meetings. I've noticed, even with my project, depending on certain people's leadership styles and egos, they do not like to leave space at the end of the meeting for staff to talk about some issues. And then too, some people don't know how to navigate or mediate certain issues. That just reminded me of that Thinking Hats book that we were talking about in the last class, and just having certain people in place to appropriately direct conversations, so they don't get like off topic, or we're talking 2 hours about, why we're only focusing on this one topic and never addressing another issue. So I'm gonna swing it over to Alexandra.
All right. So for us, there were a lot of things that we could speculate about what was going on. And so one of the things that we really thought through based on the design of this current survey was really designing and implementing a new survey. Right. So once we've had issues with this survey, we identified some flaws in the design. And because of some of the information that we got from the survey, we thought it could be useful to have a new pre and post test survey that asked more pointed, more specific questions about what had been identified as potential issues. And that was for the purposes of identifying other needs and gaps within the team, again, just to fill out the picture, because again, for the purposes of this case study, we don't have as much information as we could have. And as consultants, ultimately, I think it's important to widen perspective as much as possible. Because the things that were most explicitly identified had to do with team building and trust building, we think that much like group one, an emphasis on implementing interventions that address those, even if ultimately that's not the root cause or that's not, the most pertinent problem. There's no team that can't benefit from team building or trust building, right? So within 30 days, we talked about designing this new survey. Then 1 month to 3 month period, we talked about implementing team retreat, really again to have some opportunity, some time to get everybody in the room and get these issues on the table through facilitated discussion and through reviewing information that currently exists. And then within a 3 to 6 month period, doing something that may be more financially invested. And so we push that out in terms of the time frame, because again, if you're still getting a handle definitively on what the issues are, you don't necessarily want to put the most amount of money out that you could possibly put, when in fact some other lower financial investments may also address what the issues are. So next slide, please, Tim. What that looks like in terms of an implementation plan would be this team retreat, half-day session, get everybody in the room. They have conducted and are able to review the data from this new pre-survey. We suggested a visioning session, because if the way that they're working now is working for some people and not working for others, as a group, what do they see or what they envision as the optimal scenario for team engagement? How does working look for them at its best? And so being able to say, here's ultimately where we'd like to go as a group, would help them to devise strategies and interventions that get them from where they are to where they want to go. That would include SWOT analysis or SOAR analysis, some other kinds of analysis to talk through, okay, based on that ultimate engagement and what that looks like, what are your opportunities, what are your challenges, what are the things that may be getting in your way, like what are the strengths that you have that would actually support moving in the direction of that optimum vision. And then developing, prioritizing action items as a result of that. And then we also had mission and asset mapping, because the data revealed, the qualitative data revealed that, again, there was lack of transparency across the group. So some folks don't know what the other folks are doing. And we had a probably a less cynical view maybe than we should have, in saying that, right, the division among the group may just be because, you know, prior working relationships, or, you know, some folks work easier together, or some folks just don't know the others very well. And so this mission asset mapping within this session will help to say, here are everybody's strengths, right? Here's where we could potentially lean on in terms of the group work process, on who's good at what, right? And then how does that map back to what our ultimate goal is in terms of the work for the department is. So thought that might be a critical tool. So it's not favoritism, right? So if Alice, we'll give her a name, is a team member and she's always chosen for this, then you could point back to say, well, here is where Alice's strength is. So it's not about favoritism, it's about where we get the most bang for our buck in terms of the project needs, right? So really kind of elevating transparency among the group and why decisions are made will be helpful in eliminating some of that mistrust and helping them again to work together optimally as a group. And again, we mentioned a half day down the road, team building activity. We said they could do a ropes course. And I put in here pairing those folks with the quote unquote in crowd with folks that are in the out crowd, right? So they're learning and having to work together in specific ways, right? Where they're not a part of the groups, quote unquote, that they're currently with, that there is a divide between. And then we suggest conducting post-survey, the post-survey subsequent to these interventions to see if what these things that were put in place actually had an impact on the team's trust, increasing on the team's working together, if that improved in their both quantitative and qualitative responses to those interventions were changed in any significant way. So that is what we had in terms of our plan and action course for this case. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah, an excellent plan. But you know, without David, you've got a shot. You got a plan. All right, some thoughts along the way. When you had your early leadership course in 730, or you had some, did you talk about Hershey and Blanchard? Situational leadership, where you control or modulate task and relationship behaviors. We've kind of moved on from that now to servant leadership or transformational leadership. We kind of use those where you inspire and motivate people. One of the things I would caution you about if you are an adherent to situational leadership is that you control the task and relationship behaviors basically on the maturity or the age or the experience of the followers, and that may or may not be malpractice, but be careful of that. Everybody can learn. Everybody, you know, we need to be consistent in our task and relationship behaviors, regardless of how old you are, how ready you are, how mature, whatever. We kind of use readiness and maturity interchangeably. And one of the drawbacks of situational leadership is we assume that older, more competent, or more experienced employees don't need the same relationship behaviors that younger ones do, or less experienced, and that's not true. We need to build relationships with all of our employees. That's very important, and I thought you did a good job bringing that. There's an article, and I can share this one with you, that came up this week. Actually, I guess today's earlier, I think Wednesday this week, and it caught my eye, and I can send it out. And the question is, why it finally may be time to hire a chief leadership officer. This former Apple executive makes the case that a new leadership post would prevent toxic workplaces and help employees feel empowered. Toxic workplaces are a big problem. We all know that, and that's a people problem. You have the wrong people. You keep the Johns of the world. You don't get rid of them and you let them continue to malpractice. And so that again, that's a people problem. You've got a process now to help you get away from that, but you got to defeat that people problem first. So you got to remember that we want to treat everybody well. We want everybody to feel empowered. We want everybody to have a relationship piece in the organization. Don't forget, don't assume that because people have been here a long time and they're competent in their job, that they don't need those relationship behaviors, or that toxic work environments don't matter to them. They do. But they absolutely do. So that's one of the things. Now, I'll tell you, we had a faculty committee report at the faculty meeting on Wednesday at Gardner-Webb, and the people who got up and argued were the people from the committee. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. Obviously, the committee is dysfunctional. It's a gen ed committee. They're dysfunctional. And so the people that got up and argued against the motion they put on the floor were the actual committee members themselves. And one of them got up and said, pass this, don't send it back to us because we're dysfunctional. Well, that's not the reason to pass something. Again, how many times in organizations have you seen where we'll do the wrong thing because we know that we've got the wrong people here. We'll just go ahead and do the wrong thing. Well, but thankfully the vote was close. It got sent back to committee. It was a completely unformed motion. They didn't have all the specifics. They were trying to do standards, and they had no way to measure. I mean, I'm just sitting there thinking, looking around, does anybody else not see the problem with this? Again, we go back to, our hypothesis, the designs, our research questions, and they have to be measured. What data are we going to pull and how are we going to analyze it? Well, they were trying to develop some standards for the gen ed, but they didn't have any way to measure anything about it. And it was just like, this is like so informed. But their argument was, we're dysfunctional, so y'all should just pass this anyway. How many times in organizations do we just go along with dysfunctionality, but that rather than address the issue of you've got poor leadership on that committee? Y'all got to get yourself together, or we got to get a new committee. That's the problem, was that the committee was dysfunctional, and they admitted that. We're going to do that anyway, Alexander. We're going to end early today already. Y'all heard me grumble enough. Now, the last part of this is this: you got to be careful using sports analogies. Got to be very, very careful. And the Lions analogy, I would argue the Mavericks, the Cowboys. Sports is unique in that success is not measured the same way for everybody. In most organizations, remember that social constructivism we talked about in the last case study? Some people, it was matter about how well you serve people, and others it was how many. Well, that's a problem, and you have to come together. The issue when you start using sports analogies or sports metaphors is, what is success to the fan base is different than what is success to the ownership or the leadership of the organization. The Dallas Cowboys are a good example. Dallas Cowboys are the most valuable franchise in sports now, and been wildly financially successful. And they hadn't won anything in 25 years. They can't play dead. Let's be honest here. If from a fan's perspective, they've been completely a disaster for 25 or is it 27 years now. How long has it been since that? They've not even won a division. They've not even won what is it? They're in the NFC. They've not even won that since the early 90s, mid 90s. Not been to a Super Bowl. Not in any sense had any success from a fan's perspective. I mean, they've been a dumpster fire. But now they've made money hand over fist. That doesn't normally happen in any organizations outside of sports. Let's look at the Detroit Lions. Even the season that they went 0-16 and the season the Panthers went 1-15, those were roughly equivalent times. They still made over $100 million as an organization those years. That's pretty successful, isn't it? But now, so again, but both of those, and then the third example is the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban bought the team. They had a good coach and good players in place. They won the NBA championship shortly thereafter, and since then they have been a complete dumpster fire. They've been fined. They've had people fired. They've had people put in jail over a toxic work environment. But the thing to remember is Mark Cuban has continued to make money hand over fist, and they're just awful. That doesn't happen anywhere but sports. So we have to be careful to understand that when we're doing sports analogies, the ownership team, that they have a toxic environment, that they're dysfunctional and all that is immaterial to them because they're still making money. Now, it matters to the fans. The reason why Detroit can't win, the reason why Dallas can't win is because they have dysfunctional organizations. That's why they can't win. But that doesn't mean they can't make money. They still make money. The Panthers are the same way. They are, Jerry Richardson let the cat out of the bag. That's one of the reasons why the owners were so mad at him. As he said, my responsibility is to the investors in this team, not to the fans to win ball games. I've got to make money. That's what we're doing here. But that's what happens when you get a Hardee's man. He ran Hardee's franchises. That's how he made his fortune. You begin to understand what a toxic work, Denny's, Hardee's, Quincy Steakhouses. I mean, what a toxic work environment that he had. But that came to light. Well, that's the reason why they can't win. They've got a toxic work environment. That's why Dallas will never win again. That's why the Cowboys, this is their year. They're going to win it all. They look good early, but they'll fall apart. They always do. But they'll still make millions of dollars. That doesn't happen in anywhere but sports. Everybody else, when you're that toxic or you're that dysfunctional, you generally fail as an organization, except in sports where we have people still continue, fans short for that, continue to pay money to watch you or to, that's the problem. So be careful with the sports analogies. Winning and losing does not equate with money, and that's their real goal, is to make money. If they were to win, that would be great. But if the choice is between winning and making money, it's making money. And so that's different for those organizations. All right, let's go to our last group, and when we get done with them, we'll be done today.
Dr. Lamb, can I ask a question before we
Yes.
start? I'm coming back to the people problem. In a class previously, if I'm not mistaken, Kim Marla and I were together on a case study, and it was clear to us that the person was the problem, that the person needed to be fired. Like, we were sure about that. And our professor, Dr. Hamilton, told us that the person is rarely ever the problem. And so he said, what if systems had been in place? What if this had been different and that had been different? So in my mind, I always take that out. Okay, don't think about the person. So, but I get exactly what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying.
Process, product, always in that order. That's from a methodologist standpoint. Now remember, Dr. Hamilton is coming at this from a humanistic standpoint in leadership. I'm doing methodology here. Now, understanding in methodology, data has no value to me. It just is. But from a humanistic standpoint, data has value and deep feelings and all those kinds of things. See, just in data, it's just important to know something doesn't work as it does. We don't attach any value. We don't put our thumb on the scale one way or the other. We just report what is. And if that, if that kneecaps somebody or slaps them upside the head, that's the way it works. I don't get emotional about those kinds of things as a methodologist. Now, I'm not telling you that's a good thing, and I'm not telling you that you ought to be like me. That's not a good thing either. But what I am telling you is I just operate on data. I told you to start with, Dr. Hamilton and I are opposites in our method. He is a qualitative person, which is about people. I am a quantitative person. I am a parametric statistician by trade. I don't care about your feelings. I just care about the numbers. if I were doing theoretical research, that's what that's what I would do. But how do you bring those opposing views? Again, convergent design, mixed methodology, look at the quantitative, look at the qualitative, compare the two. But again, people, process, product. I'm a lot more from my experiences in my previous careers or career and jobs within that career. It's all about people. If you get the right people, you can do a lot of things. You get the wrong people, you can do nothing. And so I wouldn't say rarely, especially in the school business, the majority of times it's people. And if we don't get the right people, nothing we do after that's going to work. And so for our purposes here, I ask you to look, not with your heart, but with your head. And there's nothing wrong with looking with your heart. That can be a good thing. I mean, we have to have that compassion as leaders, but we have to be honest in our assessment of our data. And I think a lot of times that we continue on with people because we worry about them, and I can't be worried about whether he can make his mortgage this month or she. My job is to make sure this organization is functioning, and we'll be as humanistic as possible. But when it comes down to a choice of doing the right thing or doing the easy thing, you got to do the right thing, and that's sometimes and it starts with personnel. Now, again, I've told you I'm not a big Collins fan because it's an oversimplification. But even Collins talks about getting the right people on the bus and then getting them in the right seat. Now, that's an oversimplification of the Get Sales Google social system model, which is a lot more in depth and has a lot more pieces to it than that. But it's an excellent how-to book for practitioners because it simplifies a lot of those concepts. But again, I want you to be good people. I want you to be a servant leader. I want you to act with integrity and have a foundation of faith. I want you to be that person, that transformational leader. But in the end, if you don't have the right people, or if you have people who, teachers who abuse kids, or leaders who aren't ethical in positions in your organization, there is no fix for that. There's certain things that there is no fix for. And this is one of those cases. There's no fix for this. Now, we're going to have a case a little bit later where we're going to look at Jasmine. Jasmine's leading a customer service group. And, everything, all the feedback on and all the data we have on Jasmine is that the last thing that Jasmine ought to be doing. Now, we need to find something else for Jasmine to do if she has the ability, because Jasmine can't do customer service. But in the end, she's not suited for that line of work. And that's not being ugly. That's trying to help Jasmine. Obviously, Jasmine's very unhappy in her job from the behavior that she exhibits because she's not good at that. That's not what somehow we've got her in the wrong seat. And that's on us. We ought to be helping Jasmine do something else. We'll have that case study coming up. That's not really the whole part of it. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here, but the notion here is, but people, process, product. That's the reason why you're in leadership, or why they call you as a consultant. That's what action research is about, and we have to look at the people. And there are just certain things that are non-negotiables. Teachers can't abuse kids. Leaders, people in positions of authority in our organization can't be unethical. If I can't trust you about that, I can't trust you about anything. I can't trust that you won't steal the money or diddle the help or do whatever, fill in the blank. If you're an unethical person, what is the bridge too far for an unethical person? I'll do this, but I won't do that. Well, if you do this, you do that too. And so it comes down to ethics in leadership positions. Don't abuse kids if you're a teacher, and if you're in a leadership position, you have to be ethical. If you're not ethical, I can't depend on you financially or morally or any of those if you don't have the ethics of the profession.
Dr. Lamb, quick question on on the organizations that you're speaking about? Do we across the board? I mean, because in public sector organizations versus private sector organizations, right? We see at the private sector organizations the bottom line. So you can have a CEO that's unethical or a hospital
Toxic. That's why I was talking about sports. You got to be careful in sports, because, you know, again, we think that they're unsuccessful because they're not winning, but they're being successful. They're making money. So in for-profits, you know, money is, what does they say? Money's the great deodorant. As long, you know, we're willing to put up with toxic behavior. We're willing to put up with unethical behavior as long as the profits keep rolling in. We're talking about nonprofits. That's specific to this curricula, and this program is all about nonprofits. And that's why I said, be careful, don't to use too many sports analogies. Those are for-profit businesses. They have a different set of rules. Just like the Mavericks, how much did they get fined over their toxic workplace discrimination and harassment of women? Tim, how much money did they get, the Mavericks get fined by the NBA? And how much lawsuit money did they have to pay out? It was into the several millions.
Yeah,
Yeah, but you know, they just kept right on going because they're making money hand over fist. So we have to be careful to understand when we talk about nonprofits, that's different. That social constructivism is different than profits. You know, all of those kinds of things. And so money is a great perfume. It deodorant. It masks a lot of bad things. And so that again, my caution about using sports teams, they are for profit, and as long as they're making money, they don't care if they win. They don't care if their players misbehave. You know, the question right now is how long will the Houston Texans lose before they bring back Deshaun Watson? I mean, you know, they're trying to portray themselves. They're trying to portray themselves as being woke or Me Too or whatever. But how long will that last if they're losing and they're losing money? If people aren't, you know, coming to the games, or they'll still make money even if nobody ever shows up at the game. They'll still make money. But how long will they continue to lose before all of a sudden his transgressions don't matter as much as profits? That's remains to be seen. And so we'll see how that goes. But again, when David talks about local city county government, it is nonprofit, but there's a political aspect to it that adds another layer of complexity in these decisions. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the course. We're kind of progressing through getting more and more complex with each of these case studies and the materials that we cover. We're not quite ready to tackle the social political animal that is city county government and local elections yet, but we're going to get there. We're going to talk about those. And we're going to talk about leading in those arenas. We're trying to kind of work our way to that. But that's an excellent point. It is another layer. It is a little different. We're kind of working on more simple organizations right now, and we're moving to the more complex. As our material gets more complex, the organizations do as well. That's a good point. All right, last group. Remember, you're always between us and lunch.
Can y'all see the presentation?
We can.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Our group consists of Melody, Heather, and me. Heather couldn't be with us today. However, she was very instrumental in our discussion about this case study and putting together the case, the PowerPoint. So as we move into the background on the case study, pretty much like everyone has said before us, we assumed this was a team of 12 and that No one was absent that day, so it was a team of 12, and they were asked to complete a short diagnostic survey of 12 questions, which the last question included an open-ended question for additional comments. But we don't know much else about this team other than John is the leader. But we don't know why they were asked to take the survey, the makeup of the team in terms of gender, race, years on the job, or what it is that they exactly do, or why they were asked to complete the survey. Yet the survey has given us a snapshot of some things that are working well and some areas that need improvement. So now I'll turn it over to Melody to tell you a little bit about the data and the areas of strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, I wanted to tell you first how we went about analyzing this data. And the first thing we did was calculate percentages in each category, because that was just easier information for us to work from. We also looked at that average, the mean, and decided that that did not give us the picture that we wanted. First of all, we would be assuming that the space between a strongly and agree matches the space between disagree and strongly disagree. So that was not a good measure here. So we also looked at the other measures of central tendency, and we looked at the median and we looked at the mode. So if you look at the data just as we were given it, in 8 out of the 11 questions, the mode was agree. But that's considering having that middle neutral column there. And so we absolutely knew that this was a problem with the Likert scale, and that the feedback would have been more valuable if that category had been eliminated. That allows respondents to suppress attitudes or feelings and not share exactly what's going on. So we did recognize that the survey would have been better without that column. And we chose, and I want to explain one thing to you about this graphic that will make it make sense. We used a diverging stacked bar chart to show this information. And if you look at that black vertical line going down the center, we've placed that line right in the middle of the scale. So on a 5-point scale, that would be right in the middle at 2.5. So if you look at the bars that are leaning left negatively, so the first one, team members encourage each other to do their best, you'd see the blue and the orange. Those are the folks that disagreed. 50% of them disagreed with that statement. Now, we're smarter at this moment than we were when we created this graph, because if we had moved all the folks in the neutral column over there, that would have been 83% disagreeing with that statement. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I would say the third one down, also far leaning to the left, team members handle conflicts openly. 42% disagreed. If we had moved the neutral column over, that would have been 84%. So our team would really be able to see this visual, would make good sense to them. If you look at the ones that are going far to the right, you'll see the goals of our team are clear. 75% said that. If you go down third from the bottom, I know how our team contributes to the organization's goals. 100% of people agreed or strongly agreed with that. So then we wanted to give another picture to even better illustrate our strengths. So if you look to the left, I know how my team contributes. This is 100% of our folks know. So this would be something that we really would want to celebrate, that this team does know how they fit into the organization. They know how what they do contributes to the success and to the mission of the organization. And that's important. And so that's something we would want to celebrate. To the right, you see the goals of our team are clear. So 75% agreed with that. 25% didn't even answer it. So that if we move that to the disagree column, but still 75% feel this way. So we felt like it's the strength of the team.
But we're looking to on the right-hand side of the screen, the goals for our team are clear.
Right.
What you have to look at is the 33 and the 25 together. Or the 42 and the 25 together. Now, I've always argued that we need to put the 25 and the 42 together, or excuse me, the 25 has to go with the disagree part on that one.
Right, and nothing else on there is disagreeing. The gold
That's
and
what I mean.
green,
That is the disagree part on that one.
right,
And that is the picture of confusion. We're basically a third. I'm rounding up a little bit there. Either strongly agree or disagree. I mean, the goals for our team are clear. Once you look at that, again, that the neutral column is a disagree, all of a sudden it changes that one completely. It changes that complexity again. We've belabored this point, but once you have said this is a problem, if you continue out on that vein, what happens is you continue to delude yourself about your data, even though you know intellectually that should be a disagree. You run the risk of painting an unrealistic picture even for yourself is what I'm talking about. We have to be careful, back to the point we were talking about a minute ago, that we don't delude ourselves. We certainly don't want to mislead or be unethical in our reporting, but we also have to make sure that we don't, even though we know intellectually, but we can give ourselves an incomplete or a wrong data picture as well.
right.
That's just the point I want to make.
Quick question for you, Dr. Lamb. If we had moved that 25% to disagree, still here 75% would agree with this statement. So you don't see that as a strength?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But what I think, because of the way this is set up, and remembering, satisfaction is binary. Either you are or aren't. The agree or strongly disagree, it's either it's binary. Either you agree, how strongly or weakly is in material, or you
Right.
disagree.
Right.
And we, all ones, twos, and threes are disagrees. 4 and 5s are agree. We need to look at it that way. Again, if we did average shoe size in this class, nobody would wear that size. It doesn't fit anybody. Again, this average doesn't help us here. We need to see how many are agreeing and how many are disagreeing, how many are satisfied and how many are dissatisfied. It is not a continuum. It is not a scale. It's binary. You are or you aren't. That's important because how we deal with that is completely different, because why we stay is different than why we go. Different variables.
Right.
Using this continuum, using these pie charts, we need to yes, no, agree, disagree, satisfied, dissatisfied.
Right.
It's binary. It's the degrees of doesn't matter.
Right.
Or how much, or how happy, or how sad. Well, I just need to know if you're happy or sad.
Right.
How to is all a personal thing. I need to know if you agree or disagree.
Right. I think I'm still a little confused because 9 of the people think the goals are clear.
Yeah.
3 of the people don't.
But
in my mind, that would be
the notion here is why is that important? Or again, that 9 and 3, for those 3 people, they don't know what they're doing. I would expect that the only appropriate measure for that one, in my opinion, is all of them know what our goal is. Anything short of that is failure. I mean, how is it we've employed people who don't even know what they're supposed to be doing? That's what I mean. We need it to be that clear. And in a case like this, now how my team contributes to the organizational goals, I know how that happens. I could see a little variation in that. But the goal for my team is clear. If you don't know what your team is, you might not know the bigger picture. in organizations that are segmented and siloed, but you certainly ought to know what my job is every day when I show up at 9 o'clock. I ought to know what I have to do every day. So again, we got to be careful, you know, when we start trying to use averages and percentages. That's not really relevant to satisfaction and dissatisfaction work, which is binary. You are or you aren't. Again, back to modes and distributions are more important here than averages. Again, I'll use it again. The average shoe size, nobody on the Zoom today wears the average of our shoe size. So that can't, you know, that's not relevant to anything other than it's just an average. It's just one of those things it's good to know. If you're trying to get data that's actionable, you have to make how you report it and how you measure it. Again, back to the theoretical framework of what's important about this. Satisfaction, dissatisfaction is not a continuum. It is two different things. But too many times we think it is, and we report it as if it is, and we use averages and we use as measures of central tendency, and we use level of measurement that go along with that when they're not appropriate for the kind of data that for what we're trying to find here. We have to make them match so that we don't delude ourselves.
Okay, thank you for that. So ignore our percentages here.
No, just make them, you know, the idea here is make them tell a better or more complete story. Don't ignore them. How could we, this is the learning moment of today's lesson. How could we make these, what would we do to make them tell a more complete story about what the data has told us? So let's look at this first one. Strongly disagree and disagree is the tan and the blue. That's about half and half, isn't it?
Right, and if you include the other 33 in gray, you're looking at, you know, the majority over.
That's what I mean here. All of a sudden, when we start, all of a sudden these pictures that aren't as complete, all of a sudden, wait a minute, we had more data than we thought we did. It drew a more complete picture than we originally thought it did. You know, the answer to case study is never, I need more data. That's never the answer. You have data. Can you interpret it? Can you make it fit what you're trying to measure? We're trying to measure satisfaction and dissatisfaction here. Basically, is what we're trying to measure. We're agree or disagree, and you know, those really, again, they're not a continuum. We need to be able to perk those out and get a more complete picture of what we're doing here. I mean, the one on the right over there, when we start putting that together with disagree and strongly disagree, great day.
Right, that's 10 members of the team.
That's what I'm talking about. All of a sudden, that picture becomes wow. This is what more dysfunctional than I really thought it was. Wow. You know, I'm surprised we're not having to pay workers' comp claims from people getting punched in the nose every day with this bunch. They must be openly warring. This is a lot different than I originally thought this was. That's what I mean. Once we start putting these things together, our data is much more. I am proud to be a member of this team. Less than half.
Right.
All of a sudden, wow. The data starts to jump off the page at you. It's a lot stronger than we initially thought it was. So again, it's not just who we're presenting the data to. We got to get a sense of what the data is as well, because that's going to determine what we're going to do, what our recommendations are going to be in our action plan. You know, we want to make sure that we don't, that it was there and we dismissed it, or it wasn't as important as we thought it, or we didn't attach the importance to it that it should have. And so our action plan really isn't strong enough. And that's why I said the first two presentations today, and I'm quite sure in this one that you have a wonderful plan of action. But this data, when I look at it through the lens of the gray on your screen is disagree. When I look at it through that lens, it means Johns has to go. If I look at it through this lens that I'm seeing right here on the screen, we're just going to put the action plan in place. But when I change my lens just a little bit, then I realize, oh, this is completely dysfunctional. We've got a complete ethical breakdown here. The plan is appropriate, but the first part before the plan is going to work is John's got to go. That's the difference in what your figures would look like. Is what we're going to do going forward. That's what's important. Again, don't delude yourself. And it's easy to delude yourself, and you get into the point where, you know, John's got a family, John's got a wife and kids, John's got a mortgage, John's got A, B, and C. And this incomplete picture helps salve your conscience when you say, well, let's hope John, you know, starts doing better.
Right. Well, and if we were doing these graphs after our discussion this morning.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. And that's what, you know, I intentionally have you do it this way. I expect for you to do it this way. Because it gives us it's a teachable moment.
Right.
And that's how we want it to be.
Right.
For today is this teachable moment is when you look at it this way, no, John doesn't have to go. But when we take a different view, when we're a little more accurate in our assessment, and that's the fine line between being an amateur and being a professional at this. I'm trying to teach you to be a professional to make your living being able to do this.
Right.
And it's that little bit that's the difference between success and failure. Or it's kind of like being a professional gambler. I only got to win 55% of the time. I can be wrong 45%, but it's that you know, it's that 5%, and that's what we're talking about here. That you know, we're trying to get you that good.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Lamb. And so we did decide that these would be our areas of improvement that we felt like a problem here was the trust on the team. And again, if we were doing this again, we would say John has to go. Like that's been loud and clear this morning. But the trust on the team and the way that they work together is a concern. So I'm going to turn it back to Marla to talk about our plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our plan development intervention plan would include 4 phases. And as Melody just stated, we know that this team struggles with trusting and supporting each other. And now that we know that John is the problem and John has to go, we would go into what we learned in John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. That chapter on the law of solid ground, where it says trust is the foundation of leadership, and leaders can build trust by consistently exemplifying competence, connection, and character. So phase 1 would include or start with a 2-day team retreat that would be held off-site. And we would focus on team building, conflict resolution, and goal setting. Phase 2, and let me go back, we would turn this into what we would call a team matters meeting, because we want everyone on the team to know that they matter. So we would coin it Team Matters Meeting, and this would be held every month after the retreat, and it would be to share updates so that the team members know what each other is doing, since that was one of the problems. They said they felt they didn't always know what the other team members were doing. But it would also be to celebrate team wins and individual wins. It would be provided, lunch would be provided, so we want to keep it in a kind of like a light atmosphere, and we want to create connections by keeping it light, maybe by playing could even play some type of Kahoot games or things like that, and engage in other team building exercises. Then phase 3, we would want to complete the team satisfaction survey again. It may not be the same survey, but some type of survey to reevaluate how things are going 6 months later. Have things improved? Are the areas of improvement still the same, or is it something else? So that would be phase 3. And then phase 4, we would complete another survey at the end of the year, a year after the 2-day retreat, to evaluate the qualitative and quantitative data, and then decide on a plan of action based on the results. If things have improved, maybe these monthly team matters could move to a quarterly meeting instead of monthly, but we do feel like it would be important to keep the meetings, whether they're done monthly or quarterly, to make sure that morale is up and that everyone is on the same page, and that trust and supporting of each other has improved. So that completes our development intervention plan and also our presentation. Thank you guys for listening. And are there any questions?
Very good. David asked the question, does it matter how strongly somebody agrees? Not really. When you're doing net promoter, it does. When we're doing that 10-point net promoter scale, we only count the 2 top, strongly agree or whatever at the end on that when we're doing net promoter. But when we're working, action plans, real life, in satisfaction, dissatisfaction inside the organization, net promoter is for people who are clients of your organization. Would you continue to buy my service, and would you recommend me? That's different. We're talking about inside of the organization here. So for the inside of the organization things, for the academic inside and outside, when we're talking about the inside of the organization, how strong is immaterial? We're looking, it's binary here. Now, again, we're not talking about net promoter. That's when somebody buys your services. We'll talk about that later. We're talking about the inside piece. But the law of solid ground of John Maxwell. For my EDCI doctorals, I use Maxwell as the framework for their leadership course. And again, the law of solid ground is all about ethics. Being a servant leader, acting with integrity, solid ground, foundation of faith, and ethical behavior. So let me share my screen, and I've got 2 minutes, and we're going to be out here.
Dr. Lamb, just quickly, what I was thinking about was, we know the survey is flawed, but
yes,
if somebody sees agree and then strongly agree, would that's when we group strongly agree together may be faulty, because I might do agree, but I might not do strongly agree. And so if I don't see strongly agree, I might say, I'm just going to the disagree side. That's what I was thinking in my mind. I got what you're saying though.
Yeah. And so if we move this middle column over, it's pretty much, we see that it's, then it matches the data. There's 2 different teams. And let's see. I had to change some things here. And so I'll just pull it up off of my documents. And so this is my conclusion for today. If I can find it without taking too long. Me. I don't understand. Let me see. Here we go. All right. So if we were meeting on Sundays, we would be doing this as a unit for our devotional. Servant leaders demonstrate courage. Leaders must have integrity. And then of course, here are those things, what would you be willing to do and what you have to do. And then the third one, of course, is build your life on a sound, solid foundation of God's word, but your ethical behavior, inspire and motivate, operate with integrity, and operate with the ethics of your profession, your care and profession. One of my favorite songs is, one of the lines from Castles Made of Sand Return to the Sea Eventually. It's a Jimi Hendrix tune from back in the day, but it's so true. If you don't have a solid foundation, and that's again the law of solid ground from John Maxwell. If you don't stand, if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything, the old country song or whatever. But again, we're back to the notion here of, in the teaching business, we have some folks in here who are in the teaching business. Teachers can't abuse kids. That's kind of the central concept of personnel for that. And in nonprofit organizations, leadership has to be ethical. And if you have people who aren't, then we can't survive those two things. Those are just the hard and fast rules of our business. This case study was about making sure that you're, in the convergent design, your methodology, the data you collected matches. If it doesn't, there's a problem. What is the problem? How deep is the problem? How can you fix the problem? Is the problem fixable? Does when you fix the problem, does the data take on a different perspective? Does it tell a different story? How bad is the data? What do we got to do to fix it? All these action plans with team building. I love ropes courses. I'm a big proponent of those things. Is it mildly bad enough that that's going to fix it, or is it really? Or have we kind of hidden the real data? Is it really bad enough that we've got to do a personnel change and then do a process fix? And in this case, I would argue that the data is, once we get the true picture of the data, that it is truly bad enough that we got to do a people fix and then do a process fix. But again, we look at people, process, product. That's what we're going to be called to look at as a leader or as a consultant. All right. Thanks for playing along today. I hope you've had a decent time. What a learning experience. These always are learning experiences. There's no, again, we have to remember we're trying to learn here. And sometimes we may argue or disagree, or we may say things, or you may not agree with my opinion. And that's all part of the learning process. You have to find your comfort level with data. Data's hard, and you have to find your comfort level with it yourself. And I don't expect that to happen overnight, and you may never get to a certain place. But as long as you know how we use it and why we use it, I'm happy. The calculus piece is immaterial. All right, everybody have a good week. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Everybody stay safe. Go out state, he said.
Well,
Go Wolf. Go Bulldogs and Wolfpack. Everybody have a good day.